Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
Meron. Ako wala. The 60th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. Let's all pause for a minute of silent prayer. Thank you. The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 21 senators present, the chair declares in presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 59th Session, Monday, 2020, March 2, and consider the same as approved. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the journal is approved.
Mr. President, we have visitors here in the gallery today. We have Mayor Muhammad Johar Disumimba of Tamparan, Lanao del Sur, and Councilor Vincent Paul Elago, our good friend from Zamboanga City, as well as the members of May Sangguniang Kabataan of Manolo Fortich, the town of Manolo Fortich in Bukidnon, home of the longest zip line in Mindanao. I think they're here somewhere.
All right, we welcome all our guests to the
Thank you, Mr.
Senate this afternoon.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary, the birthday celebrant will proceed with the reference of business.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday to our secretary. Happy birthday, ma'am. Blooming today. Yeah, blooming.
Reference of business, bills on first reading, Senate number 1383, entitled An Act Increasing the Bed Capacity of Sinait District Hospital in Sinait, Ilocos Sur from 25 to 100 and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Refer to the Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate number 1384, an act increasing the bed capacity of the Mangatarem District Hospital, the Municipality of Mangatarem, Pangasinan from 25 to 50 and appropriating funds therefore.
Refer to the Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate number 1385, an act strengthening the Internal Affairs Service, IAS, of the Philippine National Police, PNP, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 8551, otherwise known as the Philippine National Police Reform and Reorganization Act of 1998, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Refer to the Committees on Public Order, Justice, and Finance.
Senate number 1386, an act establishing a Technical Education and Skills Development Authority TESDA Training and Assessment Center to be located in the Municipality of Bana, Province of Ilocos Norte, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Refer to the Committees on Higher Education and Finance.
Senate number 1387, an act increasing the bed capacity of the Southern Isabela Medical Center in Santiago City, Province of Isabela, from 350 to 700 beds and increasing its maintenance and other operating expenses, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Refer to the Committees on Higher Education and Finance. Health and Finance, sure.
Senate number 1388, an act institutionalizing and strengthening the National Cybersecurity Interagency Committee created under Executive Order number 95, series of 2019, renaming it to National Cybersecurity Council and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Refer to the Committees on Science, Technology, Civil Service, and Finance.
Senate Number 1389, an act upgrading the Caraga Regional Hospital in Barangay Washington, Surigao City, Surigao del Norte into a tertiary level hospital, increasing its bed capacity from 150 to 500 beds and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Referred to Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate Number 1390, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Robert Wally Lopez Mendy, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
The Committee on Rules.
Senate Number 1391, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Bienvenido Marañon Morejon, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
The Committee on Rules.
Resolutions. PS Resolution Number 338, entitled Resolution Directing the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation and the series of business shutdowns that are happening in the country, including the impact of the 2019 novel coronavirus disease, COVID-19, on employment, and assessing the measures being undertaken by various national government agencies to address these issues, introduced by Senator Villanueva.
Referred to Committees on Labor and Economic Affairs.
PS Resolution Number 339, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the effectivity of the investment promotions agencies and its corresponding incentive regimes in generating revenues, creating jobs, and providing business opportunities for the people, introduced by Senator Marcos.
To the Committees on Economic Affairs and Ways and Means.
PS Resolution Number 340, resolution urging the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the status of the government initiatives and programs to contain and eradicate the sesame fly infestation of the mango industry, introduced by Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Agriculture. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Bukas na lang, boss. Okay. Bukas na lang.
Session resumed.
Bukas na lang. Mr. President, nga. Mr. President, on our schedule, although I promised Senator Villar that she would be first on the agenda on the organic agriculture, we have a privileged speech requested by Senator Kiko Pangilinan, and privilege hour takes precedence in our rules. We'll just request maybe the good colleague of ours, Senator Kiko, na we'll just keep it. Yes. Yes, we can request that the interpolation may not be today. We can move the interpolation for another time. So we can accommodate our dear colleague, Senator Villar. Yes. Interpolation niya bukas na. Okay lang, tita? All right, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator, our distinguished colleague from Pampanga and Republic of the Philippines, Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan.
Thank you. Did you file, what is the bill?
Mr. President, it's a privileged speech.
Oh, it's a privilege speech,
Yes,
okay.
Mr. President. He wants to avail of the privilege hour.
Senator Francis Pangilinan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Quote, unquote, worse than the Japanese occupation. This was how a 92-year-old farmer described the effects of the rice tarification law. She knows whereof she speaks because she was a hook warrior at the bloody retaking of the old Pampanga sugar mill garrison from the Japanese. Aside from quoting his mother in his August 7, 2019 column at the Manila Times, Marlen Ronquillo said the small rice farmer in central Luzon and much of the country is, quote unquote, dead man walking. In December, at the height of all the merrymaking and the flood of imported rice, a 57-year-old rice farmer from the country's rice granary is believed to have committed suicide out of the desperation that Ronquillo described. Mahirap ang buhay, pero higit na mahirap para sa magsasakang Pilipino. It has been over a year since the Rice Tarification Act was signed into law last February 14, 2019. From the government's assessment of its implementation of the law, matters more or less are on track. The law has put in place the Rice Competitive Enhancement Fund to cushion its dire impact to farmers. The DA has assured that 4 RCF major components are being implemented, providing farm machinery, quality seeds, credit, package of technology and training, backed up by assured funding of 10 billion yearly for the next 6 years. According to the department, as of this January, the Philippine Rice Research Institute has obligated a total of 2.56 billion for seeds and distributed 552.6 million worth to thousands of farmers in 557 out of 798 municipalities nationwide. The grant of 3 billion pesos worth of various farm machineries starting the first semester of 2020 was also pledged. For the training and extension component, a total of 878 million pesos has been allocated, of which 284.4 million pesos have been disbursed for training, communication materials, accreditation programs, scholarships. For credit, the Land Bank has disbursed a total of 358.2 million pesos, and the DBP has released 283.5 million pesos to hundreds of accredited farmers and farmers cooperatives nationwide. In short, over the next 6 years, government support for rice farmers, if implemented effectively, would be about 60 billion pesos. Subalit ayon sa isang pag-aaral ng Federation of Free Farmers, FFF, 68.18 billion pesos ang nawala sa mga magpapalay nitong nakaraang taon. So ang nakalaan para sa magpapalay natin na 60 billion pesos sa loob ng 6 na taon, na wipe out na sa kita ng ating mga magsasaka sa isang taon. May kulang pa ng 8 billion pesos. At hindi match ang dapat na pakinabang sa mga consumer ng nasabing batas. According to the FFF study, 34.16 billion pesos lang ang natipid o naging ganansya ng mga consumer o bumibili ng bigas sa mas murang halaga. Yan po ang big picture. Pero mas mahalaga, ano ang sinasabi ng ating mga magpapalay? Kumusta na po sila? Marami ang sumusulat sa amin. Di na raw sila magtatanim o magka-cash crop na lang daw sila. Merong nag-construction worker na. Ang asawang babae ng isang magpapalay na masukan ng kasambahay dito sa Maynila. Sabi ng mga sumusulat sa aming tanggapan mula pa nung 1 taon, yung tatay ko nagmumukha ng putik kakasaka, tas pagbentahan, lugi lang nararanasan. Renta sa lupa, inutang para makatanim. Hirap, gastos at pagod niya walang napala dahil sa batas mababa na lang nila na ibebenta ang tanim nila. Mahirap na magsasaka, lalo pang pinahihirapan. Binhi, mahal. Krudo, mahal. Abono, mahal. Insecticide, mahal. Upa sa tanim, mahal. Tapos bibilhin nila palay na napakamura. Paano makakabayad sa inutang na puhunan? Patay ang magsasaka. Anihan na, pero tila wala pa ring aksyong ginagawa ang gobyerno. Wala pa ring pagbabago sa presyo ng palay. Dito sa Pampanga, 9 pesos per kilo. Maawa po kayo sa mga magsasaka. Pinapatay po ninyo kami. Ito po ay sinulat po sa atin. Sa ibang bansa nga, kapag magsasaka, mayaman. Baliktad sa Pilipinas, 14 to 18 presyo ng palay natin. Maayos na eh. Pero ngayon, 7 ang presyo ng palay. Masyado naman kinakawawa ang magsasaka. This rice farmers crisis may soon become a food crisis. Lalong-lalo na at anihan na ng dry season or crop at wala pang plano paano lalagyan ng preno ang pagbagsak ng kita ng mga magsasaka ngayong Marso at Abril. We support the resolution filed by Senator Cynthia Villar, Senate Resolution 332, pushing for an inquiry on the implementation of the RCF. Beyond that, this representation would also like to know, number 1, ano ang report sa 5,000 peso cash compensation na pinaglaban natin dito sa Senado bago matapos ang 2019 para sa mga naapektuhang magpapalay? Ilan ang nakatanggap? Ano ang feedback? Sapat ba raw ito? Kasi nga ang mga magsasakang nakausap natin sa Nueva Ecija, hindi nakatanggap nito. Marami daw requirements. Paano sinusolusyonan ang ganitong problema? For the Departments of Agriculture and Finance, other relevant agencies, how many farmers have benefited from the RCF? How many have they gained from this fund? What have they received in assistance from RCF? And what is the impact on them? Gusto rin nating malaman, how much has the government gained from the import tariffs? How are these being spent? What are the projected earnings in the coming years? And how will these benefit the farmers and the sector as a whole? We need to see if the figures on paper match harsh realities being experienced by our farmers on the ground. Sapat nga ba ang 10 billion kada 1 taon? Number 2, speaking of farmers on the ground, ilan ang nag-shift na ng crops? Ilan ang hindi na nagtatanim? The numbers might magnify our sufficiency level. Speaking of sufficiency, ano ang rice sufficiency level natin ngayon? Noong panahon ko as Presidential Assistant on Food Security and Modernization, rice sufficiency was at 91.95%, fluctuating until, according to government data, 86.17% in 2018. Ano na ang sufficiency rate ngayon? Number 3, sa NFA na inutusang mamili ng local rice, gaano karami ang nabili? Ilan ang nabilhang magpapalay? Magkano? Taga saan ang mga ito? NFA should be proactive in procuring from local rice farmers at pumunta sa sulok-sulok ng bansa. Hanapin ang mga palay ng mga farmers natin na karamihan ay nalalayuan at walang transport. O kaya ay di sigurado na may aabutang NFA personnel na bibili ng kanilang produkto. Number 4, for the Bureau of Customs, ano ang rice smuggling situation? Ilan ang nahuli sa undervaluation? Meron ba? Remember, we asked that the government look into reports of undervaluation kasi lalong apektado presyo ng palay with the influx of smuggled rice. May mga nahuli ba? Number 5, ito rin ang naniniwala tayong nais din malaman ni Senator Villar. Ano ang kalagayan ng RCF ngayon? According to a recent news article citing the DOF, BOC collections from duties on rice imports have dropped to 1.71 billion pesos from January 1 to February 14 this year, from 2.22 billion in the same period last year, a 23.1% dive. If this continues, this will imperil the RCF or the fund? Are imports being undervalued or amounts underreported? Is technical smuggling the culprit? Non-government organization Integrated Rural Development Foundation earlier rang the alarm bells that RCF was not enough to cater to the local farmers. IRDF Executive Director Arce Glipo said that if the fund were divided equally among farmers, they will only receive financial assistance of 4,000 pesos each, far from their losses reaching as high as 30,000 pesos. Mahalagang malaman lahat ng ito dahil ang sunod-sunod na lugi ng ating mga magsasaka ay nakakaapekto na sa kapasidad nila na magsaka pang muli. Kapag bumaba ang kapasidad ng kanilang pagsasaka, malalagay rin sa alanganin ang kapasidad nating pakainin ang ating bansa o ang ating food security. Lalo na't nagsasabi na rin ang Vietnam at Thailand na bababa ang kanilang rice production dahil sa tagtuyot. Isang NASA technology ang nagpakita na may tagtuyot sa dalawang bansang pinag-aangkatan natin ng bigas. Based on the article, Thailand is facing the worst drought in the last 40 years. Of the 3 million metric tons of rice imported by the Philippines last year, more than 2.1 million metric tons came from Vietnam. As the world's biggest importer of rice in 2019, where will this leave the Philippines? Paano kung wala na tayong ma-import na bigas? Paano kung hindi na magbebenta ang Thailand at Vietnam dahil bagsak ang kanilang supply? Pag nangyari yan, tataas ang presyo na inaangat na bigas, gutom ang kapalit ng mataas na presyo ng bigas. Kung matatandaan, noong 2008 World Financial Crisis, nagkaroon din ng global rice crisis. Between January and May 2008, the international trading price of rice jumped dramatically, quadrupling from $300 per metric ton to $1,200 per metric ton in just 4 months. And the spike in rice prices was not due to crop failure or particularly tight global rice supply situation. That time, the immediate cause of the rise in rice prices, trade restrictions by major suppliers, panic buying by several large importers, a weak dollar, and record spike in oil prices. This time, a triple whammy may cause another rice crisis. The rice tariffication law's lackluster implementation, the terrible drought now being felt by our rice exporters in Thailand and Vietnam, and the still undetermined and uncalculated effects of the coronavirus outbreak, particularly on China, also a rice-producing and rice-consuming country, as well as the impact on prices of goods. This means that the dire impact of the lackluster implementation of the rice tariffication law has not only cast its gloom on the country's farmers, but is threatening consumers as well. The scenario is important that the government should be prepared. Ano ang plano ng gobyerno? Alam natin na may lead time, both in ordering for more imports and more importantly, in planting of rice. Ang ating mungkahi, number 1, create an interagency task force on rice security composed of the DA, DBM, DOF, and the DTI to oversee the swift implementation of the rice tariffication law. Get this task force to review the implementation of the law and its effects on the rice industry, on the farmers and farm workers, and even the NFA employees, and submit its findings immediately to the Senate. Number 2, have the DOF, PNP, and NBI deputize the PNP and the NBI to go after technical smugglers in the same way they have done after tax evaders. Monitor possible collusion between the BOC and some rice traders in the technical smuggling and undervaluation of rice imports. File non-bailable charges of economic sabotage and jail the smugglers. Get the Philippine Competition Commission to go after profiteers and price rice manipulators. Number 3, ipatupad ng tama ang rice tariffication law. Bigyan ng compensation ng mga natamaang magpapalay para makapagtanim sila muli. Speed up the NFA procurement of local rice. We reiterate our call for direct cash assistance for the farmers to be sourced from the RCF or from a supplemental budget. The assistance should also benefit all affected by the brunt of the rice tariffication law. Lalo-lalo na doon sa mga nakikisaka lang, yung walang lupa, walang pera, yung walang-wala. Sa dulo, ang layunin natin dapat ay food security at self-sufficiency, sapat at tamang pagkain para sa lahat. We have become more import-dependent and moved away from attaining sufficiency and self-reliance. We are on our way to become rice beggars when we should have been reaping the fruits of a bountiful agriculture landscape. This is an extremely serious concern that should be addressed urgently, not just by the administration, but everyone who eats, as it will throw vulnerable sectors into a worse state of poverty and hunger. Nasa isang emergency situation tayo at kailangan ng ating mga magsasaka ang maagap na tulong. Ang liit na hinihingi ng mga magsasaka sa atin para mabuhay at huwag umalis sa kanilang mga bukid at magpapatuloy ng pagbubungkal ng lupa para tayong lahat ay makakain. Moreover, feeling the pinch of the low rice prices, sabi pa sa isang news item, huminto na sa pag-aaral ang ilang mga anak ng mga magsasaka. The havoc wreaked by the lackluster implementation of the rice tariffication law is another factor that seems to be forcing people out of the agriculture sector or discouraging the young ones, the next generation, from staying in farming. If the next generation no longer wishes to farm, then our future is in terrible straits. Our food security is undermined and compromised. Babalik ako sa sinabi ng anak kong si Frankie nung 9 years old po siya. We must treat our farmers like our parents because they're the ones who feed us. Dapat nating ituring ang mga magsasaka na parang ating mga magulang dahil sila ang nagpapakain sa atin. Maraming salamat po.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, allow our colleagues to study the privileged speech of our distinguished gentleman, we probably will, if permission of our colleagues, that we take up the interpellations tomorrow. I believe Senator Pacquiao has approached me and he'd like to interpolate the good gentleman. So, and I'm not sure if the Senator Villar, I'm not sure. No. Thank you. Tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1318 under Committee Report number 35. I so move.
All right, so we suspend interpellations on the
Yes.
privilege speech and
With the permission of our
motion.
of the good gentleman from Pampanga
All
and
right.
our colleagues.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, with that, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1318 under Committee Report number 35.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order.
May we recognize, Mr. President, the sponsor, Senator Cynthia Villar. We are in the period of interpellation. Kiko, do you want to? We'd like to recognize, in the list, we have Senator Kiko Pangilinan and Senator Frank Vilon. Senator Kiko Pangilinan would like to be recognized first.
The distinguished lady from Las Piñas, Senator Cynthia Villar, is recognized, and to interpolate the gentleman from Pampanga, Senator Francis Pangilinan.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we know if the distinguished sponsor of the measure would be willing to yield to a few questions?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you. Before we proceed with our interpellation, we would like to just make a manifestation. Mr. President, this representation is the principal author and co-sponsor of Senate Bill 1318, proposing amendments to the Organic Agriculture Law of 2010, to boost the sector and ensure that the needs of small farmers who practice organic farming are met. Mr. President, Section 12, Article 6 of the Constitution requires members of Congress to notify the House concerned of a potential conflict of interest that may arise from the filing of a proposed legislation of which they are authors. Mr. President, from the time of this filing of Senate Bill number 34, authored by this representation, until today, the farm enterprise, my farm enterprise, of which I am part owner, has not been certified and accredited as an organic farm, even if our farming methods are all natural and chemical-free, and will therefore, being a non-accredited and non-certified organic farm, it will therefore not benefit from any provision of this bill meant for organic farmers' enterprises. At present, there is no potential conflict of interest as contemplated by the Constitution. We would just like to place this on record, Mr. President. And with that, Mr. President, we can proceed with our interpellation. We would like to get the big picture of the organic farming sector, Mr. President. May we know how many organic farms are there in the country today?
How many? 500. The practitioner is 165,958.
165,958 organic farms.
Yes. Yes, practitioners.
And these are individuals or farmers. May we have,
Individuals.
what would the land area be?
Ano land area? Nasaan ang land area? Ito? Ano? Ito. Okay. 482,652 hectares.
482,652.
652.
And that would roughly be,
3.
how many percent of our agricultural?
Our agricultural land is 11 million, no?
Yes.
11, parang ganun. 11 to 12 million hectares, di ba?
So 25%. No, sorry.
No,
That
no.
would be 4 million.
It's 5%,
Point-
mga 5%.
Almost 5%.
Almost 5%.
5% of our agricultural lands are organic. May we know if we have figures as to the total volume of organic agriculture
Products.
production? Yes.
Ano yung products? Ano?
How big?
Wala, there's no figure because I think there's no certification. Because it's so expensive to ask for certification. Under the provision of the law, you have to get this third-party certification, and it will take you 100,000 to 150,000 a year to get this certification. So I don't think the small farmers can afford to get this certification.
And this is precisely why we wish to amend the
Yes,
law.
Yes.
In that case, how did we get the 165,000 figure for
We have a
organic
program.
farmers?
We have a program, the National Organic Program, Organic Agriculture Program of the Department of Agriculture. I think that's where they got the figures.
So if we have 165,000 organic farmers plus, and 5% of our agricultural lands are organic farming lands, should not the Department of Agriculture have at least some figure as to what this 165,000 farmers in 5% of our hectarage
Maybe they
producing?
have, ano ba ang figure ng vegetable?
Because we have the number of farmers, we have the area. I think the next step would be to get their production.
They will be doing this as part of the program because if you implement this participatory guarantee system, it would be farm-based. So we will now have a way of monitoring the produce of these farms.
So in other words, at the moment, ma'am, the Department of Agriculture has been unable to monitor
Yes.
the output of organic farmers in the country after 10 years.
Kailan ba ito pinasa? Kailan ba ito pinasa? Yes, about 10 years. Okay, 2010. This was passed in 2010
425,000
and implemented in 2011.
425,000. Ma'am, we have 525. As of 20, only as of 2016. On the DA website, it says 525,000 metric tons of agricultural products.
Nasa DA
So
website daw, 520,000.
that is, but as of 2016, wala akong updated figures.
They said it's there, but it's not validated. So
Okay.
they don't want to release it, you know.
I see. So,
Parang tentative. It's just an estimate, but it's not validated.
so in other words, after 10 years of the law being enacted, we don't have reliable figures as to the agricultural, organic agriculture production in the country.
Because there's no certification.
May we know, ma'am, what is the budget for organic or agriculture under the Department of Agriculture?
It's 550 million a year.
550 million. Perhaps moving forward, ma'am, the DA, we should request the DA that they tighten their operations in terms of if they have 500 million a year, that should be
Maybe our good senator from Pampanga should make a resolution so we can do an investigation on what they do with the 550 million.
yes, ma'am, because you'd like to think that after 10 years, they should be aware of what their yields
I think
are.
that provision of the law where you get this certification, what do you call that certification? National
Accreditation. yeah.
third-party certification, that is one that hampered the monitoring of organic farming because that's very expensive. So we did not see it that way. I think the income of our organic farmers will be just at most 100,000 a month, and they have to pay for a certification of 100,000 a year to 150,000 a year. So I think they are selling organic products with no certification.
And therefore, no way of monitoring
Yes,
what is or isn't organic.
it isn't organic.
And that's why...
You can always say it's organic, but it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Although, of course, may we have data on how many are accredited organic farms?
Ilan daw?
Because there would have, in the last 10 years, I recall, and I'm sure Senator Villar is familiar, she's also been there a number of times. Costales Nature Farm is an organic farm.
It's 65 operators covering 1,318 hectares.
65.
Operators,
1,000,
318 hectares.
which means in the last 10 years, and precisely because of the cumbersome process of certification,
Yes.
only 65 farm enterprises have been able to get an accreditation.
Yeah. And I think they are exporters. That's why they have to get the certification, because if you're going to export, the only way it can be considered as an organic export would be to get a third-party certification.
But even with these 65 operators, the DA does, and 1,300 plus hectares, the DA does not have the yields, the output.
Ito ang output nito. Tingin mo. Magkano?
Kasi yan, accredited na yan. So dapat mayroong record na yan. Siguro yun yung nakalagay doon sa website.
Estimate ko daw ng output nito. In terms of products. Oo. They don't have any data.
Yes. Well, we hope perhaps, tawagan na lang yung 65 operators, tanungin sa kanila magkano yung
ilabas
inani
nyo daw
ninyo
ang
this
data,
year,
ito,
last year.
ipadala nyo sa kanila.
Magagawa naman siguro ng paraan yan ng
Tawagan nyo
DA.
daw yung 65.
It wouldn't be so difficult. There are only 65 of them.
Yeah. They assure me that they will call the 65 operators and they will give you a figure.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. But it's also it is to their interest to know the producer, that they can monitor how whether or not we are growing or the industry is growing, ma'am. So I would appreciate a copy, but at the same time,
We will send you a copy. You know, it's really very difficult to handle our agriculture.
that is true, ma'am. And that's why, hopefully, with this passage of this law, we will be able to revive or strengthen and improve on our organic agriculture methods and the development of the industry. It was mentioned earlier, ma'am, that we export organic produce. Do we have data regarding the volume of exports?
Export kayo ng organic. Process, not raw. They have export of organic but processed, not raw. So I guess pag-process kasi DTI na yun eh. di ba?
Yes. Because you'd like to get also data as to what is the, well, again, the contribution to our exports. I understand in 2019, the Philippines exported some $5 to $6 billion worth of agricultural products. So it would be interesting to know how much of that would be organic, but
I think very small.
very small. And then in the context of Thailand, for example, in the same period, Thailand exported $37 billion worth of agricultural products. So you can
Because
see.
in Thailand, it was the late king who supported agriculture. And I think they have very great respect to their king, so they followed. So they really focused on agriculture.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, on the matter of employment, so there are 165,958 organic farmers.
No, yes.
Farmers. Would that be also those employed in the industry, or are just the farmers? Hindi kasama po yung mga farmhand.
Kasama na daw po.
So 166,000 are employed in the organic agriculture sector. Would we have, ma'am, marami ang nagsasabi, mas mahal ang organic agriculture, mas mabusisi. In fact, ang tawag po namin doon sa abono na urea, pag niligay po yan sa gulay, sa tanim, ang tawag po dyan magic kasi biglang lumalaki. Pero yung urea, ma'am, distinguished sponsor, ano yun? Chemical fertilizer yun.
In our organic farm, we don't use urea.
That's right.
We produce our own organic fertilizer out of kitchen waste and garden waste.
Yes, ma'am. And that's why they say.
We don't spend for fertilizer, organic fertilizer.
Kaya ultimately, at least in the short run, mas malaki ang yield ng chemical fertilizer sa tanim. Kaya mas marami ang benta. Kaya kayang mas mura. Unlike yung organic na hindi ganun karami ang yield, kaya medyo mataas ang presyo. So ang tanong, ma'am, meron ba tayong data kung magkano ang kinikita ng mga organic farmers, ito yung mga employed in the in the organic farm sector?
No, wala kayong idea. It says here, production costs for organic are higher because of greater labor inputs per unit of output, because greater diversity of enterprises means economies of scale cannot be achieved.
That's right.
So, and post-handling of relative small quantities of organic foods result in higher costs because of the mandatory segregation of organic and conventional produce, especially for processing and transportation. Okay. Marketing and distribution chain for organic products is relatively inefficient, and costs are higher because of relatively small volume. So we want to achieve the economies of scale by doing this. Kasi ngayon, parang walang economies of scale. So it's more expensive.
Pero wala ho tayong data dun sa 165,000 employed in the organic farming sector, organic agriculture sector. Ano ang kanilang incomes?
Ano din? Sinasabi dito, pakyawan ng bayad sa farm hands because of seasonal nature.
Yeah. So hindi ho sila fixed income earners. Doon sa 500 plus million,
And sometimes it's intercropping to our major crops like rice and coconut. Kaya hindi masyado sa coconut, it's more of rice.
yes ma'am. Doon sa budget po na nabanggit kanina for organic agriculture, 550 million, ano po ang breakdown po nito?
Ano daw breakdown ng 550 million?
para lang maintindihan natin ano ang saan ang mga programa at ano ang mga ginagastusan ng ahensya.
PS. And what is this? For PS, it's system. Production support, its system, it's 105 million. For
Product-
what is this?
Production support,
For training, it's 180 million.
Training.
And then research is 60 million, and
facility, agricultural machinery,
agricultural machinery is 188 million.
irrigation,
Irrigation is 15 million. So a total of, anong total nito?
100, 285,
A
300.
total of 549 million.
And ilan po ang personnel ng DA o employees ang nasa organic agriculture programs?
Sa central office daw, tatlo.
Tatlo.
Sa region, ilan sa region?
almost isa lang ma'am, pero walang
Tatlo.
plantilla.
Almost one for each region with no plantilla. Job order.
15.
Okay.
So 18.
18.
18.
May job order kami ma'am,
Tama ba yun?
Ano ang job order niyo sa central?
17 people.
Sa central daw, 17 people ang job order. So 17 plus 3 is 20 plus 18 is 38.
Puro job order, walang.
Tapos may job order na.
Okay.
Puro job order yung 18.
Kaya walang resulta.
Mas marami pa yung job order kesa sa plantilla.
plantilla.
So, di ba yan ang problema natin sa government? Puro job order.
Puro end of contract. So ang problema po niyan, well, that's 38 people for the entire program, ma'am.
Yes.
So talagang mukhang
Kawawa.
mababa at mahihirapan. Lalo na't pagka naipasa po natin itong batas na ito at i-implementahin na po nila yung
No, this will involve this participatory guarantee system will not only involve DA.
That's right.
Ang gagawin lang ng DA dito ay yung Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Standard because they're the main certifying body.
Yes.
The others would be local government unit, the core PGS group, and any private group or organization. So this is farm-based.
Yes, ma'am.
Hindi na tayo magre-rely sa solely sa DA, okay? It is a locally focused quality assurance system which is developed and practiced by people actually engaged in agriculture,
Yes,
organic agriculture.
mga stakeholders po yan.
Stakeholders. So
Supermarkets.
it is built on a foundation of trust, social network, and knowledge exchange. It is used to certify producers and farmers as actual and active practitioners of organic agriculture.
Yes. Pero I understand, ma'am, of course, in the initial phase, the DA will be the one to go
It's
around.
the Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Standard. That's BAFS. Nandito po yung head ng BAFS.
So
Sila
the
po
BAFS,
yung magsisimula.
ibang component, ibang staff plantilla yan, mas
Yes,
malawak
yes.
yan. Ano?
They have their own.
Ang ano lang is that the BAFS will now be the lead agency under the Department of Agriculture to help set up and organize
Yes.
these
But the rest
systems.
would be private sectors and local governments.
Yes.
And for your information, we have a league of organic agriculture municipalities in the Philippines with a membership of more than 100 municipalities.
Yes. Well, perhaps when this law is passed, when this bill is passed, maybe the Department of Agriculture will have to do some reorganization and
Yes.
provide more support sector of organic farming and organic
Maybe you
agriculture.
can file a resolution, so we will have a basis for any hearing that will support organic agriculture.
Thank you, ma'am. We would like to have the list of the 65 operators and the,
You have a list? Okay. We have a list here.
Yes, ma'am.
With no volume. If you would like, we will give it to you.
yes, ma'am.
after
Thank you
the
very much.
interpellation.
Ma'am, you already mentioned the guarantee system. How then will this work? What is the, for example, day one, ipasa na itong batas na ito, naging batas na. Ang BAPS will now organize, ano ho proseso niyan? How do you now put in place that guarantee system?
There will be guidelines, and they will try to organize themselves. And the three organizations that can be certifying body that BAPS can approve would be the core PGS group, the National Organization of Local Government Units, or any private group or organization. Okay, and each group has their respective requirements before they can be considered as an organic certifying group. So it will come from BAPS, tapos maggagawa siya ng organic certifying group with certain requirements. They have to fulfill their requirements, and then they can be accredited as certifying body. And they will be the one to go to the grassroots to certify certain groups. Okay.
For example, ma'am, you and I are we are both familiar with the Costales farm. It is in Mahayhay, Laguna. How will that system now, and what will their participation be, Costales farm?
Halimbawa, gusto niya maging PGS group, he has to get 5 members each. Bawat PGS group may 5 members practicing organic agriculture. And then they will apply for certification from the Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Standard.
And will that process be simpler than the process that is now in
Yes.
place? Because
It's simpler and it's not expensive, cheaper. The most important thing is it's cheaper.
Yes.
Kasi yung third-party certification napakamahal.
Yes, yes.
This will cost only around 600 to 2,000 pesos
Yes,
per certification, as against 100,000 to 150,000 per certification per year. Kasi ang gumagawa lang yung parang
third party.
third party na nasa baba lang.
Yes.
And they are intent on helping their co-farmers also.
So ma'am, that would be the basic process question. Dati, mahal, kaya hindi nakakapag-certify. Dati rin, may third-party system na isang third-party ang
Tuloy pa rin yung third-party certification for bigger farms, para especially those who would want to export. Kasi yun accepted sa export, sa abroad. But this one is just accepted domestically.
So there will be several certifying entities.
Yes.
Unlike today, how many certifying entities are there?
Hindi, ngayon, dito sa Pilipinas.
Today, under the current law.
Tatlo.
So tatlo.
Oo.
Now, we are going to delegate.
Endless. Yes, delegate.
In effect,
Pero they have to be accredited
Yes,
first.
yes.
Oo. But anybody, any 5 groups of farmers practicing organic farming can apply.
In other words, they will be filing, they will be accredited, and after their accreditation, 5 ho sila, guarantee, what is the term again?
Participatory guarantee system.
So yung 5 na yan, not necessarily all farmers. O lahat ba yan farmer?
Basta in agriculture.
Because I
Pwede
raised,
din pwede din livestock. And
yes, I
others.
remember I raised this question because I was in Thailand last year, and precisely they have this guarantee system. But the guarantee system does not only include farmers.
Yeah.
It includes the suppliers, those who want to get organic produce. For example, in the Philippine setting, healthy options
Oo.
is supposed to
Kung
be
ikaw will limit yourselves to organic, di ba?
yes.
Oo, hindi yung lahat tinitinda mo. Di
So
ba?
I guarantee, can it
The sellers can be certified also, provided they limit themselves to organic food
in other words,
or organic products.
a system of guarantee can also include restaurants who are
Yes. Yes.
because, for example, apart from healthy options, there is a farm organics store.
Yes.
They
In
want
fact,
to
there is
se-
a restaurant in Quezon City run by a priest. Ang kanilang restaurant is organic.
And even, well, we were discussing this with the minority leader earlier. He goes to the weekend market in Green Hills, and there are
Organic.
traders who are selling
Organic food.
They're not necessarily farmers.
Yes.
They're traders.
Traders.
So the guarantee system can include farmers organizations, can
Yeah.
include traders, can
Yes.
include restaurants. Is that right?
Yes.
All of whom are committed, of course, to organic agricultural products.
Yes.
And they will certify. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And of course,
Everything in the value
the BAPS,
chain.
ma'am, the BAPS will be
yes.
the
The lead agency.
lead agency that will also monitor them.
Yes.
That will also...
And they monitor themselves also.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Kaya nga, it's a group and they monitor themselves.
So do we, for example, in Laguna, you can have as many as 500.
Yes. But they have to be in a
five.
group of 5.
Yes.
Yeah, 5.
5 or more.
5 or more. Yeah.
5 or more. No? Okay. Okay. Sige.
Kaya lang pag madami na, mahirap na, so maybe they may breakout group,
Yes,
di ba? Yung maghihiwalay na pag sobra dami.
But the minimum is 5
5
who
per
will
group.
group themselves together. It also encourages, precisely, you will have economies of scale because
Yes, yes.
hindi lang isang farmer yon, 5 yon.
Minimum of 5.
Siguro yung 5 na yon, may siguro mga 10 hektarya na total nun.
Yes.
Maybe, no?
Yeah.
Hypothetically. So pag 10 hektarya, mas maraming yield.
Yes.
At pag mas maraming yield, hindi
Mas madaling ibenta
i-transport,
ibenta, o
Yes.
may,
Parang
meron
yung,
ng volume.
Kasi ang sitwasyon ngayon ng maliliit na farmers, halimbawa, meron siyang maliit na lupa, meron siyang 100 puno ng nyog, makakakuha siya every month ng 100 nyog, pero kung siya lang, dadalhin pa niya sa Maynila yung 100 nyog, napakaliit.
Yes.
Pero pamasahe. Pero kung 10 sila, o 5 sila,
We will develop the economies of scale
yes. So that is part of the
program.
the intervention.
Advantage of the program.
How to create economies of scale. Ma'am, I'm not yet clear as to because to be honest, I started my study of the measure and wanted to get first a big pictures. So I still have questions I want to go through a second time. Ito hong process of GPS. So hindi
PGS.
PG,
PGS.
PGS. Bakit GPS? Global
Yes.
positioning sa iba na yung PGS. And I'd like to see, I'm waiting for some material from Thailand because they too have this system of guarantee, and I'd like to just compare. So
This PGS was suggested to us by the International Organization of Organic Farmers Movement. Oo. They come here, IFOAM, and they came here and they suggested this to help the small holder farmers.
So we will find ourselves in a situation also, ma'am, and if I understand it correctly. Earlier you mentioned merong pang-export.
Mas
Ibang
level yon.
ibang level ng certification yon.
Yon, mas mahal yon.
Mas-
Tayo dito lang sa domestic.
Yes. So,
But that is also provided in the law.
In
This
other
in
wo- yes.
addition for the smallholder farmers.
so the supplier has a choice. Pwede siyang kung gusto niyang export quality, kailangan siyang magpa-certify dun
Doon
sa
sa third party.
third party. Pero kung hindi naman niya balak munang mag-export, gusto
Yes.
niyang
Dito
local
lang.
muna, magpalaki muna siya. Gumanda muna yung kanyang operation locally dito sa
Yes.
PGS na siya
Okay.
muna. Without, well, kumaga, and then he or she can graduate into the
Yes.
third party.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
At
Kasi-
least we're giving a chance for them to grow and afford it.
And the PGS system precisely hopes to, aims to address the difficulty in certification at the moment, given the current provisions of the
Yes.
law. Kaya walang nagse-certify o meron man 65 lang after 10 years.
Oh.
Napakaliit kasi nga hindi angkop dun sa mga nangyayari sa baba.
Yes.
And this hopes to bring it down
To the level.
to the
The
yes.
smallholder farmer level.
Yes. So this does not mean that someone who wants to aspire to become an exporter
No, no. That doesn't stop him.
does not stop him or her. He just has to go through a more stringent
Yes.
system of
Certification.
Yes, yes.
But this one is stringent also. This
It
is
has to be.
strict also.
Yes.
Oo.
This is
Kaya
not.
lang, mas mura to because they do it themselves.
Yes, yes. Ma'am, I still have some questions dun po sa process, but I'd like to get first some of the data from Thailand, if I may be allowed to suspend my interpellation.
Sana it will not delay the passage of the bill
No, ma'am.
because we will go on recess in
If I can-
4 days time.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So if you have questions na I can answer it na in writing and
No,
so
ma'am,
that
we can-
if
we
you're
can-
satisfied, yeah.
Yes. Ma'am, we can continue tomorrow. I just need the material because
Okay.
I wanted to
Yeah.
better understand yung process nung guarantee system. It's actually, ma'am, maganda ho yan kasi it actually empowers the community.
Yes, yes.
To
That's
get
why we
involved.
want to pass this.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So with that, ma'am, we would suspend our interpellation until tomorrow with the permission of the
Thank
good
you
sponsor.
very much from the good gentleman from Pampanga, and thank you to the President of the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there's still a few members who would wish to interpolate the measure. We move to suspend consideration of the same.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we, with the permission of the body, because, Tito Dick, okay lang na mahaba ba ito? Kasi si Tira na kanina na yun. Privilege speech? 2 minutes. Yeah, okay. Ay, Pia? Wala po, wala dito. But you just told it to me. It's not nakalista. Yeah, Mr. President, on our lineup is supposed to be si Tira, but maybe with the permission of Senator Cayetano and Senator Tolentino, Senator Gordon would like to deliver a privileged speech of importance, of national importance. So, Mr. President, if it's all right with Senator Cayetano. Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator Richard Gordon.
Senator Richard Gordon, gentleman from Zambales, is recognized.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and thank you to Senator Pia Cayetano for her graciousness. Thank you to the Majority Floor Leader. I rise today a matter of transcendental importance to our country, and I'm going to speak about 2 issues that are related to this. Unang-una po, yung ating pumapasok na pera na napakalalaki dito sa ating bansa at tila hindi masawata. Mr. President, money laundering has become an international crime, especially after the 9/11 crisis. And so a lot of countries have fallen under the influence of the FITF to make sure that money laundering we have a handle on money laundering. It's the means upon which criminals ensure that at the end, crime pays. Yan ang problema. Yung mga nagkaroon ng krimen ay kumikita pa sila, and with the proliferation of Philippine offshore gaming operations in the country, it is the Filipino people that pays the price. As on the Supreme Court decision on the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation versus Gidwani, money laundering was defined as a crime whereby the proceeds of an unlawful activity are transacted, thereby making them appear to have originated from legitimate sources. Now, Mr. President, I'd like to state here that nakakagulat to, and that's why I'm constrained to make a presentation on this matter today, and I would like to announce that we are motu proprio calling for a blue ribbon investigation on Thursday. I've already issued the announcement day before yesterday, and therefore we are going to investigate this motu proprio. Now, Mr. President, nakakita na ba tayo dito ng $5 million in cold cash? I wonder if any of the senators here, Senator Rizal, Senator Pangilinan, Senator Zubiri, may nakita na ba kayo ng $5 million in cold cash? Or $10 million or $20 million cash? Or $100 bills? Now, Mr. President, in the last several months, starting last year,
I'm imagining I'm visualizing that.
yes, and I will make it the visualization even better. If you look at some of the money that has come in, that is nakabalot, nasa maleta, you can see the maleta there, punong-puno ng dollars. Now, Mr. President, if you look at the way it has been brought in, a total, baka mali pa nga ito, baka
Brown out. Di ba hinugot ni Amy yung kuryente? Parang hinugot ni Amy yung kuryente. Tawagin niyo ako pag may kuryente na.
Ready to issue, Mr. President. Ready to issue, Mr. President. Yung flag mo,
All right.
Ready to issue, Mr. President.
All right, the session is resumed. Senator Gordon, you have the floor.
thank you very much after I have been pecuniarily interrupted. Let me just describe what we're talking about here, Mr. President. Before us is a list of POGO of money that has come into our country. And I don't know why they're using, we have the real names. And I think the last time I heard we have parliamentary immunity here. And so therefore, Mr. President, if you take a look at the slides, starting 17 December 2019, Mr. President, $2 million came in under a certain Mr. Kai. Let's just call him Mr. Kai. On 27 December 2019, Mr. Kai again came out with $4 million. I was hoping that I would see the whole line. On 3rd January 2020, or about 6 days later, or 7 days later, came out with $4.10 million. Cash yan, pinapasok, cash. On 6 January 2020, $2 million were brought in. On 8 January 2020, ang pumasok $3.50 million. 21 January, $3 million. On 28 January, 2020, $3 million. And you can see the list goes on. Somebody running this. Having said that, Mr. President, makita nyo, ang dami-dami pumapasok na pera. One guy has come in with 47 times na pumapasok doon sa ating, yan ang listahan po. Yan, may mga pangalan na yan. Can you scroll down, please, so that all the senators can see it? Can you make it bigger? You can see the various amounts coming in. Is it not possible to make it bigger? Kai Long Choi, ayan yan, no? Kai Him Chan, Xiong Neng, whatever it is. Ang dami-dami. 4 million, 3 million, 2 million, tuloy-tuloy. Kunyari, investment. Why Yip Leong? And the classic thing about it is that they are matino. Pumapasok ng legal. Dinideklara na sila ay nagpapasok ng milyon na dolyar. So, nakikita nyo, yan, si Kai Hailey, 3 transactions, si Lee Kahi, 3 transactions, at ang total niya, 11 million. Ito, 2 transactions, si To Yim Leung, 2 transactions, Wi-Fi Leung, 3 transactions, $9.5 million. I can go on and on. You can see how many transactions. There is even one guy there with 47 transactions. Meron Pilipino kasama ko at na nagpapasok dyan. In total, I think I have the total among Filipinos and Chinese. Yan, Rodriguez na yan. Nahuli po yan. Simon Rodriguez. Nahuli in September. Nahuli siya, dahan-dahan naman. Nahuli siya at hindi pa nag-declare. So, nahuli siya. Bumalik ulit. This time, nag-declare. At pagkatapos, sinama na yung mga kapatid, mga kamag-anak. Ayan, John Joshua Rodriguez, 40 transactions. Can you bring it back, please? 40 transactions. Makita ninyo, ayan, no? John Joseph, 1.5 million, $606,000. $400,000, $900,000, $1 million. Tuloy-tuloy. Tuloy-tuloy. Lagari. It's an assembly line of bringing in millions and millions of dollars to our country. Now, normally, Mr. President, ang bawat Pilipino, the moment you go over $10,000, you have to declare. Now, just because you declare doesn't mean you're not a money launderer. Now, siguro naman kahit a grade school student, pag sinabi mo, ganyan karaming dolyar na pumapasok, magtatanong, ano ba ang negosyo mo? Ba't ka nagpapasok ng ganyan kalalaki? At saan napupunta yung pera? Sapagkat kung titignan nyo, a total of $447 million or 22.69 billion pesos was brought in by 47 individuals, including Filipinos, from September 2019 to February 2020. The total amount brought in by Chinese individuals was $210 million or 10.6 billion pesos, or 46.98 of the total amount. Now, how much is $447 million? Kung babayarin natin ang utang natin sa IMF o doon sa ibang lugar, aabot ho yan kayang bayaran. Sapagkat ang utang natin doon ay about $200+ million. Nahilo na. Akin lang yan. So that means, ayan, external debt natin by creditor country as of end September 2019, $82.67 billion ang utang natin. Countries for whom Philippines owe foreign debt, that is around or less than $500 million. Remember, this is $400+ million. Australia, $596 million. Malapit na natin mabayaran. Ang Canada, lalo malapit, $479 million. Virgin Islands, $205 million. Bayad kaagad. Luxembourg, $133 million. Bayad kaagad. Because we can pay total debt because we have over $440 million. Now, the question is, saan napupunta itong perang ito? Ito ba, dinadala? Nakalagay dyan karamihan ay for casino. At siyempre, pag nilagay sa casino yan, at nanalo, pinasok ng cash, babalik ka ngayon, bibigyan sila ng certificate na nanalo sila, pwede nilang ipasok sa banking system, ibabalik nila ngayon sa source, sapagkat legal na nagkaroon sila ng papel na dokumento. Meron rin silang panlaro. halimbawa sa mga investment. And this is one thing that I'd like everybody to take note. The Philippines has become number 2 today in terms of real estate values in Manila. Tinalo na natin ang Hong Kong. And if you show the slide of the Fitch, makikita nyo, ang Hong Kong pa rin ang pinakamataas, pero ang Pilipinas ay number 2. Bakit? Pumapasok yung mga POGO dyan, at saka yung maaaring yung perang pinapasok dyan ay nadadala sa tinatawag nating real estate. It's just one way of washing or laundering money. Makikita nyo, number 1 ang Hong Kong, halos magkatapat na ang housing price index ng ating Manila, no, or Philippines. That means kung ang Hong Kong nagkakagulo ngayon sa Hong Kong because hindi na makakuha ng apartment ang mga Chinese, mga bata, nababahala sila, ganun dito sa atin. Mahihirapan ng we cannot have our own apartment, our own tenement, because the money has become so expensive, it's very hard to pay for it. So that means it could lead to social conflict later on, Mr. President. Having said that, if we go back now to the previous slide, you can see na hindi lang yan, it can go into other things. Can it fund a military expedition? Can it fund the Maute in Lanao del Norte? Lanao del Sur, rather. Pwede ba sila bumili ng firearms? Can it fund, for example, other things like money laundering can be used in other things? Now, if we want to be safe, we can fund alleviate the classroom shortage in the Philippines of 8,104 one-story, 4-classroom building at 2 billion, at 2,775,000 each. We can fund our armed forces with that kind of money. One frigate costs 18 billion. So makakabili na tayo ng isang frigate. And we can buy 4 F-35 jets at 5.2 billion. Can you slow down, please? I cannot catch up. 5.2 billion pesos each. Go ahead to the next slide. You can fund 15 C-130 aircraft which we need in these islands. 1.5 billion pesos each. Tayo ngayon may 5 na C-130. 2 lang ang lumilipad. Yung 3 nasa garahe. 7 Martin F-16 Fighting Falcons. You can buy all these things, Mr. President, with the kind of money at 3.12 billion each. Kaya bumili natin ng mga bagay na ganyan. Now, saan ba napupunta yung pera yan? Like I said, napupunta at nakikita natin, when I relate now and cross over to POGO, makikita nyo sa POGO, they occupy apartments now at 50 or 20 or 40 per apartment. Kaya nakiba na ang presyo ng real estate dito. So you can see, if you occupy the POGO at 50 per, di ba dapat makialam ang fire department dyan na pagka nakasunog maraming mamamatay. There is one multinational subdivision that I can show you a little video on that shows na itong how POGO affects us. No? 70% of the subdivision is now occupied. Now, mind you, this is not a humble subdivision. It is upper middle class. Go ahead, please. That's a lady. Mali pa pala ako 1 to 200. Nagpapalit-palit. They're fetched by buses. Nice-looking buses. Nice-looking vans. They go going back. 12 years sa van na yan. Now, can you imagine the impact on water alone? There is a water shortage in our country, in Manila. Sa dami niyan, let's say 400,000 POGO, maapektuhan ang tubig natin. maapektuhan ang kuryente natin, maapektuhan lahat, pati basura. So, we do have a problem. Here, 19 passengers. Bababa dyan sa bus na yan. O akyat. Bababa. Can you speed it up some more? And look at the house. There's another house. Yun, 50 ang katao doon sa bahay na yan. Yan. Nabutan natin ang bahay na may lamang 50. Dito, coaster number 1, total passenger 21. Their coasters are clearly marked, which means it's a very organized operation, Mr. President. Hiring buses, hiring cars, hiring vans, getting homes. Kompleto talaga. Mas organized pa sa gobyerno, Mr. President. So, yan, Hyundai bus. And they have numbers on the buses. Parang school bus nung araw. 130, 220. So you can see, Mr. President, it's a very highly organized operation. And what's the problem also is that they even have a firing range inside. That's right. Firing range. Yan, side of the firing range. Sinuturbisyon ng mga tao. And by the way, if you will recall, the other day, there were PLA identification cards caught in a shooting involving 3 Chinese types na napatay ata isa at iba yan. No? Killing of a Chinese worker for an online gaming company in Makati was shrouded in mystery on Saturday after the police chief. I submit, Mr. President, because we found Chinese military identification cards here, although hindi in possession of the people who killed, there are 2 things that you investigate. Bakit may baril yung mga yan? Bakit may dalawang 45 at saka 9mm na baril yung mga yan? And also, bakit may identity card? Now, of course, sabi nga ni Senator Lacson, we can send missives to China and say, can you identify this PLA card holder? But I'm sure, baka walang mangyari dyan, no? So, in other words, Mr. President, it has crept into our society. So much so, if you have 400,000 people here, and not only in Manila, they are already in other places. Davao, Olongapo, in my own hometown, meron sila. And nagkalat talaga ang POGOs, no? So, you can imagine the presence of 400,000 people in Manila that can easily take over, and I'm going from the sublime to the ridiculous. You can take a look. In Pampanga, they have 4. Olongapo, they have 3. In Calabarzon, they have 2. In Central Visayas, they have 4. The whole Cavite Covlandia has been taken over by apartments built for POGO, Mr. President. So talagang they have overwhelmed us. It's a creeping invasion where they have taken up specific areas where the Chinese are. I'm not being Sinophobic. I'm just trying to express some concern on why there is no seeming regulation, no seeming effort to try and locate these people. If they have firearms, delikado yan. If they're bringing in money, hinanap ba natin yung pera kung saan dinala? Tayong lahat dito, ang tawag sa atin dito, politically exposed persons tayo. When we put in money in the bank, they will ask us, saan mo kinuha yung pera? Even my children, tatanungin yan, politically exposed ang tatay mo, kamag-anak mo, asawa mo, nanay mo, tatanungin, politically exposed person, sasaliksikin yan. When I got a donation from my good friend in Taiwan of $1 million for the Red Cross, just for recently, nagtagal doon sa bangko at I had to call them, oy, para sa Red Cross yan. Ito mga ito, labas-pasok doon sa airport na walang, excuse me, na wala man lang tanong. Worse, shouldn't be, lagay mo na, sabi ng batas, basta nag-declare, okay. Pero nahuli nung isang beses, hindi nag-declare. Mr. Rodriguez. A few days later, he's back, only declaring. So does that mean na porque nag-declare ka, hindi mo nahanapin yung pera? Dapat hanapin natin kung saan napunta yung pera, at the very least. Kung wala sa law yan, it's a time to change the law and make sure that anybody who makes a declaration of a significant amount of money must declare right there and there. The other question I ask is, nag-report ang customs sa Central Bank. Nag-report in September. Hanggang ngayon, walang action. Ayan, sinumbong si Rodriguez, Simon John Gangani, no? Na nagpasok ng 700,000 at later on nagpasok ulit ng $17 million. Up to now, wala pa rin. At nung nilabas ko ng isang araw yan, sabi ni Central Bank Governor, my good friend, and it's a good friend indeed, si Ben Diokno from UP, sabi niya, noted, no? No comment, sabi niya gano'n. Si Sally Dominguez, who I went to school with in Ateneo, said, I'm aware of it. And now, sabi niya ngayon, ina-alert na nila. Maybe too late, the horse may be out of the barn, pumasok na lahat ang pera, saan dinala yan? Saan ginamit yan? Has it gone to Mindanao? Has it gone to buy arms? You will recall, Mr. President, na noong 1970s, President Marcos said to go to China para awatin si Mao Zedong na magpadala ng resources sa NPA. And that's how tumigil ang NPA, nawalan sila ng sources of funding. So you can see, we will be easily destabilized by anybody, by even a syndicate with a lot of money. That kind of money, as I said, can buy all kinds of arms, can buy schools, can buy C-130s, can even put people in office easily. They can fund the kind of disease of some of our friends, and they can become regulatorily captured, if not hostage, to whatever these people want. So, Mr. President, I am sincerely concerned about this because, as I already told you, I don't have to go to too many things like, with that amount of money, they can buy their own condominiums, they can build their own buildings. I even heard that a friend of mine, I don't have proof of this, but I was told, natatakot sa magsabi, they bought 1 billion pesos of, sa bahay sa Forge Park. Ginamit yung pangalan ng asawa at humanap na lang sa outside area na magbibigay ng manager's check for the cash para natuloy yung transaction. So obviously, Mr. President, there is need for us to make sure that we check this. Why? I'll even show you how brazen they are. They even have a bus that says, if you need to fix up your immigration, ayan, yung bus na yan, nakalagay, airport transfer, company, visa, tickets, passport service, immigration clearance, extended stay, work visa. My gosh, Mr. President, I was the Secretary of Tourism. We brought in these tourists, visa on arrival, but it was clear they cannot extend, they cannot convert. Pero ito they convert, we should ask the Department of Labor, sino nagbibigay ng permit? Yung mga tao natin, tama, si Senator Villanueva. Ang hirap-hirap kumuha ng trabaho, pero ito mga ito, papasok dito, i-convert nila yung tourist visa nila, magkakaroon sila ng trabaho kagad dito sa mga bagay na ito. Sino ba ang kumikita talaga dito? Ang kita ng gobyerno, kaparinggit, Mr. President. Ang kita ng gobyerno sa taxes, do you have it? Ay kumulang lang 9 billion. Alam nyo ba, yung TIN, walang TIN karamihan yan. Out of 60 POGOs, only 10 organizations have their employees properly documented with TIN. So ano kukuha na 9 billion, samantalang dapat makuha 20 billion. Isa pang masakit dyan ay yung tax nila, franchise tax, dapat 5%. They were assessed 5% by the BIR. Ang inassess, because nag-appeal, napunta sa PAGCOR, ang sabi ng PAGCOR, hindi, 2% lang yan because that is money earned abroad. I disagree with that, Mr. President. Why should we keep leaning over backward? And the Finance Secretary back up the PAGCOR. So ano nangyari, instead of getting a lot of money, like maybe about 50 billion more, wala tayong nakuha. Doon lang sa TIN, we could get another 50 billion in taxes. And yet, tayo mga Pilipino, we just watch the caravans go by, and we don't know it's hurting us. We don't know that it is making inroads to our moral fiber. You have prostitution here. Senator Hontiveros uncovered this. Take a look at the pictures of our people, our country being used to allow them to have their own prostitution dens, Mr. President. Their own drugs, everything. And it doesn't matter whether Chinese or Filipino, That is a travesty upon mankind, Mr. President. Mr. President. So you see, it really affects the moral fiber of our nation, distorts our property values, distorts our capability to control people who can do it. They do it with such impunity, they stick their tongue out as they go all the way to the back. They shoot people, and they get away with it. They kidnap POGO employees, Mr. President. My gosh, what has happened to our country? Sabi nga ni Senator Drilon, sabi niya, in all my 21 years, mas matanda sa akin si Drilon ng konti sa itsura, no? Itsura lang. But I'm telling you, I am chagrined, as I'm sure Senator Drilon is. We smile about it. We are both chagrined that this is happening to our country. This is totally unacceptable. I don't care if they put in money. If you want a very quick solution, dalhin nyo sila doon sa somewhere in Nueva Ecija, doon mo sila ilagay doon. At wala na dito sa Maynila. Then, hindi pa magkakaroon ng problema sa kuryente o sa tubig dito. And at least you can know where they are. You have to know where they are. If you don't know where they are, kung sakaling magkagulo yan, hindi natin alam kung nasa naroon yan. Do you remember, and Senator Dillon and I were talking about it earlier, and I've been saying this on radio. Ang sabi ko, do you remember Little Tokyo in Davao? When General Bato de la Rosa was 10 years old, and there was a Little Tokyo in Davao. And, di ba 10? 15 ba? And all of a sudden, these people in sari-sari stores, they were majors and colonels in the Kanpeitai, in the Japanese army. So when the Japanese came in, they knew where to land, they knew where to go, and you know that maybe some of this money can be used to really get people who will cooperate with them in case we have trouble with them. Are they penetrating our armed forces? Are they penetrating our police? My God, Mr. President, sometimes I joke about it. I used to do it, not anymore. I used to say that we must be a viable country. But today, we're becoming a viable country. B-U-Y-A-B-L-E. Hindi na tayo viable as a country. We let our borders collapse. We let our islands be taken over by some of our neighbors who are supposed to be good guys. And, Mr. President, we allow them to bring in as much money as they want. They come from Hong Kong, and they are allowed to gamble here. But the take is so little, it's not even worth the spit, Mr. President. And so, Mr. President, I would like us to thank the body for allowing me this so that when we conduct the public hearing on Thursday, we will all know where we are, the overview. And we should be able to research, each of us, to be able to know how we can fix this situation, not just in aid of legislation, but to ensure that the flag of the country still reigns sovereign in our country, that we cannot allow any other country to gain economic, they used to say imperialism. Imperialism was a way a country was able to take over and run the natural resources of a country and take it back home. Here is another kind of imperialism. This is mercantile imperialism. Talagang the power of money. Every day they come in and they buy our people, and they buy our homes, and they buy our buses, and they buy our everything, Mr. President. It's a juggernaut. And to my mind, it's about time we act. We must act, Mr. President. Read my lips. It is time to act. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The Minority Leader is recognized, Senator Drilon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentleman from Zambales, our good friend, Senator Gordon, yield the floor?
Yes,
To
sir.
a few clarificatory questions.
Willingly, Mr. President.
Mr. President, what we hear today, 10 years ago, was nowhere in our consciousness. There was no POGO then. That's why there were no incidents described in detail by our colleague from Zambales, and I have to put on record my commendation for his being able to gather all of these facts. But, Mr. President, what I want to bring out in this interpellation is a question of policy, because we are policy makers.
That's correct.
Now, obviously, this is happening because we have POGOs in our country today. If we do not allow POGOs, these incidents would not have happened. Would you agree with that, Mr.
That
Sloan?
may be so, Mr. President. Probably so.
I'm sorry?
Probably so.
Yes, because if there are no POGOs, all of these nefarious activities would have no purpose. Now, is the gentleman aware that that initially this kind of overseas gaming operations was prevalent and done extensively in Cambodia?
Yes, sir. In fact, they've removed it already.
That's correct. It was initially in Cambodia, but because of the objections of the Chinese government, they closed the overseas gaming operations in Cambodia, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. In fact, they brought the Chinese police
Yes.
in an airplane, and they pick up all these POGO people, those criminals, and they brought them on a plane back to China. An intrusion on the sovereignty of Cambodia, Mr. President.
But that is the way by which the POGO operations stopped in Cambodia. I'm not saying that the same thing should happen here, but as we point out,
We shouldn't allow that, Mr. President. Like
but
China.
the fact is, Mr. President, the overseas gaming operations in Cambodia was stopped.
That's correct, Mr. President.
Now,
But they still have the casinos.
yes, but I'm talking about POGO only. Now, Mr. President, where do you think this POGO, with overseas gaming operations went?
Maybe here.
Not maybe. They came to Manila. They came to the Philippines because they were no longer allowed to operate in Cambodia. In fact, Mr. President, I want to bring something to the attention of the Chamber and the good sponsor. There was a notice from the police office of Yantai City, Shandong Province in China, dated January 29, 2020, which effectively says, and let me quote the English translation, it says, quote, those who participated in overseas communication scams and POGO gambling and who had taken the initiative to return to their hometowns before February 8 this year will not be blamed. In so many, I don't want to read the whole text, Mr. President, but the whole text apparently is a notice that requiring all those who committed telecommunications fraud and includes POGO, it mentions POGO, gambling specifically. This is a notice from the Chinese police, and it mentions POGO, and saying that they should return to China. Confronted with this information, our ambassador, Philippine ambassador to China, Chito
Santa Romana.
Santa Roman, did not deny that this was, he said, I am not aware of it, it has not come out of the state media, but I will not be surprised if indeed there was that order, although it will be implemented gradually so as not to harm the Philippine economy. Now, so apparently, Mr. President, if I read, and we will bring this out in more detail in the investigation. Apparently, really, the Chinese government has taken a very strong position on their citizens being engaged in overseas gambling, and they have taken a very strong campaign in Cambodia, resulting in the closure of POGO, of overseas gaming operations. What I'm driving out, Mr. President, is this, what is happening to our country today, apparently is rooted in the very presence of overseas gaming operations run by the Chinese. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor.
And therefore, shouldn't we examine the possibility of really, after the investigation that you have done, consider the possibility of expressing the sentiment of the Senate that the POGO operation should be stopped? Senator Villanueva has mentioned that in his investigation of the workers, Chinese workers. Senator Hontiveros mentioned that in the course of her expose on the Bureau of Immigration. And now Senator Gordon has again mentioned it in the process to expose the sums of money coming in. It's maybe about time, Mr. President, that we should examine this policy. We are a policy-making body. Should we continue with this policy, of allowing overseas gaming operations in the country with all the illicit activities that comes with it.
Everything is on the table, Mr. President, including eradicating POGO entirely. But before that, I'd like to see what are the syndicates behind this.
Yes.
I'd like to know how much taxes we're collecting, and I want to know who is not paying the taxes and who is not enforcing the law, Mr.
I
President.
agree with the President. In other words, we must lay the basis for whatever policy this chamber will adopt. I am just saying that we should have all options on the table, including passing legislation which would declare this illegal. The theory of the Chinese government, if it's illegal in my country, it should be illegal for my citizens to do the illegal thing outside of my borders. And that is why they have prohibited in Cambodia the operation or the participation of Chinese citizens
Yes.
in overseas operations. And they have, at least the police in China, did issue a warning. That they will cancel the passports. And as I would repeat, our Philippine ambassador to China did not discount the possibility of this order really issued, and although the implementation may be gradually done. Because, Mr. President, again, as I said, all of what you have exposed in this chamber, the shenanigans from of what we see here, all arises because of a policy decision to allow overseas gaming operations in our country. And I agree with the good sponsor that we should expose this and see exactly to what extent this is happening so that this can be the basis of a policy which we will adopt insofar as POGO operations is concerned. Would the gentleman agree with that, Mr. President?
I agree with it wholeheartedly, Mr. President. In fact, if I may be allowed to add, in my whole career, Mr. President, I've learned not to look closely at a particular problem without the comprehension. I always step back and take a look and put in all the matters that are happening and see what is the impact of this in our country. For an example, Mr. President, are they using, I'm not totally exculpating China from this because they have the biggest intelligence agency in the world, Mr. President, as far as I know. I'm not discounting the fact that they could be sending intelligence agents here, as you can see with the PLA badge and certainly in other areas. Mr. President, there's another thing that I'd like to emphasize here as well. At the height of the coronavirus, if you take a look at when it came in, December, January, February, they brought in about 200 plus million pesos here, dollars here, Mr. President, not pesos, dollars at the height of the coronavirus. And there was a plane from China, Mr. President, that Philippine Airlines landed here, a plane, when they took about 60 of our compatriots in Wuhan, in an area there. And Mr. President, what came in was a lot of other Chinese personalities. The Filipinos were put on a bus and they were brought to Clark. I wrote a letter to the Department of Health about this for quarantine. But the Chinese were allowed to go home, Mr. President. I think that's very cavalier. I think they should have been under the microscope, so to speak, to protect our people. But it seems when it comes to China, malambot tayo. And nagagalit pa si Senator, si Secretary Panelo sa akin. Dapat daw ibigay ko. Ang nagbigay na nga ng reports dito sa atin ay yung Commissioner of Customs. Walang ginawa sila noong September, wala silang ginawa October, November, December, January, February, now it's March, wala pa silang ginawa. If the Senate has not done its duty, it would not happen, Mr. President.
Yes, and let me again commend for the record what the gentleman from Zambales has done insofar as putting this in the public consciousness. But I would repeat, Mr. President, all of this arose because of the policy of allowing overseas gaming operations, principally with the Chinese as the clientele, because gambling is prohibited in China, and therefore it is the Chinese officials they would really take offense at the fact that their citizens are traveling in Manila to engage in gaming operations. In fact, in that document which I cited, the Chinese police said all those involved in overseas telecommunications fraud and gambling will have their passports canceled.
Yes.
And therefore, all of these POGO workers that we see here would have to go back to China. By the way, Mr. President, to your information, how many POGO workers are there in the country today? Illegal and illegal? I mean, with work permit and without any work permit. I know Senator Villanueva has been looking into this, but would for the record,
I don't think Senator Villanueva, he's really hot under the collar here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. If, with the indulgence of distinguished gentleman from Zambales. Unfortunately, Mr. President, we have different data coming from the
Okay,
Department of
give
Labor
us-
and
give us the
Employment,
range.
PAGCOR, BIR task Force. For DOLE figure, it's 123,056.
Only?
Only, yes, Mr. President. PAGCOR figures is 97,283. While the task force came up with the figure 108,914.
So which is which?
Your guess is as good as mine if you want to
That's
these are all registered, Mr. President.
That's only in Pasay.
We are
Yes,
not
that's
even
correct.
talking about
Yes.
the total number of foreign workers who came
Point
here.
of
Because
information, Mr. President. On January, February, again at the height of the coronavirus, when it was discovered in Wuhan, 596,000 or 536,000 Chinese arrived here. Arrived here. So, you know that there is unregistered, there's unregistered, and they're operating all over. This can operate clandestinely, Mr. President, because of the internet.
Mr. President, just for the record, the range that was given by, of numbers, or the numbers given by Senator Villanueva, is anywhere from 97,000 as a low,
yes, and 123,056
as a high.
as a high.
Mr. President, the estimate in the private sector, which I assume is more accurate or more believable, there are about 200,000 POGO workers in our country. And the leasable that the POGO operations rent approximately 450,000 square meters of land, sorry,
470.
of office space. So, and this, to me, Mr. President, what the POGO industry is doing to us is create a bubble in the real estate industry. So that the moment they leave, there's a danger that that your real estate industry will suffer, because you can imagine if there are 450,000 gross leasable area that they rent.
I direct the attention with the permission of my good friend,
Yes.
Senator
Well, there
Dulan.
you have a better
Yes.
presentation, probably.
That's right, Mr. President. 1,405,011 square meters for existing POGO occupiers, Mr. President.
Is that only for the operations, or that includes the residences?
Doesn't include the real estate. That's just the commercial buildings that they're occupying, Mr. President. Office space. They become number one, no longer BPO. POGO is now number one, Mr. President, in office space. And I can prove that. Di ba, meron tayo? Pakita nyo nga. Ayan, no? And you can see that it has grown and grown and grown. And in fact, I think they've overcome the BPO. This is by Lee Chu, the
Yes.
expert in real estate.
Well, the BPO industry plateaued, and the POGO industry took up the leasable area. But again, Mr. President,
And that's where your point about the bubble is dangerous.
yes,
Because it creates a disruption and a distortion
Yes.
of the reality. If they suddenly pull out, what happens to the banks who lend money?
that's correct, Mr. President. Very correct. When they pull out, the banks who financed all of this leasable space
Condominiums.
would be holding the empty bag. These are footloose operations. So again, Mr. President, you know, except for the property for the property market, where the property prices have gone up, I do not really see any difference. Yes, on the board, maybe the good chairman, Sandro, can
Yes, Mr.
explain to
Mayor.
us.
Fitch ratings show the property price hikes. It's a spike. pose rising risk to the bank. Fitch Ratings noted that prices of residential properties rose 10% year on year in the third quarter of 2019, making it one of the strongest growth prints in any major real estate market since 2010. Condominium prices in Metro Manila climbed by an unsustainable 30% year on year, Fitch pointed out.
And unfortunately, Mr. President, these very figures are being cited by those who defend the POGO operations as a benefit to the economy. It's quite unfortunate. These are short-term gains, and which puts us in at the end of the barrel insofar as the POGO operators are concerned. Again, this points to the fact that we must adopt a clear policy once all of these are established in order to have a long-term solution to this problem, not only a knee-jerk reaction, but something, if we are convinced that indeed this is not good for our country, we should adopt a policy, a stronger policy on this insofar as their continued operation of the gaming operation, the game of POGOs are concerned.
That is why, Mr. President, I said earlier, I stepped back to look at the comprehension. What are the, as Senator Lacson was whispering to me earlier, what do we do? What do we do about it? You know, there's intelligence and security matters that have to be addressed. There's property that has to be addressed. There is crime that has to be addressed, labor that has to be addressed, and we have to work together as a Senate to find out what is the best way to do something about it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and we hope that this investigation that will be led by Senator Gordon will lead us to a clearer option insofar as policy is concerned with regards to the Philippine overseas gaming operations industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Before we recognize Senator Villanueva, then Senator Ontiveros, who would like to know if the gentleman has in his stats the amount or figure how much the Philippines earns from these POGOs.
Yes, Mr. President, I think we have that. We earned about 50, we missed out 8 billion pesos from the employees, Mr. President. Regulatory fee, 8 billion pesos, Mr. President.
Per year.
A measly 8 billion. And the opportunity losses could go up to about even more. 45 billion? 50 billion, 50 billion.
All right, Senator Villanueva and then Senator Ontiveros.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At the onset, may I
Unrealized.
put on record this representation's appreciation and commendation to the distinguished gentleman from Zambales for taking the cudgels in exposing these wicked schemes that are happening right before our very eyes. Let me remind the body that in November 2016, when we started hearing the illegal foreign workers at Clark Air Base, when we started conducting the investigation, and then we moved from the Committee on Labor to the Blue Ribbon Committee, if you would recall, Mr. President, dun ho lumabas yung dalawang commissioner from the Bureau of Immigration, Commissioner Argosino and Commissioner Robles, na sa unang bahagi ng hearing ay kinomend pa namin dahil nahuli po yung dun sa Pampanga, more than 1,000 plus. Yung pala, during that time, nakakuha na sila. Nakahingi na sila ng 50 million pesos.
No, iba yun. Iba yung nahingi nila doon. Hindi natin ma-approve. Inakuha nila dito, nakuha ng video.
Exactly po.
Ayan o.
And just to point out, dito ho nagsimula during the hearing yung ating curiosity, ano ba talaga itong POGO? And that's why, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, we have been calling to curb the ill effects of POGO. We made mention about the real estate bubble, and perhaps we should not only look into the prices na going up or spiking, but also we look at our kababayans na nangangarap balang araw magkaroon ng sariling unit sa isang kondominium.
It's unreachable.
Unreachable. Yung pong hinahanap natin na negosyo na maaaring maitayo at makapag-produce o makapag-create ng jobs. This POGO, they are hiring 95% Chinese nationals. So again, we have been calling for the suspension of this operation until such a time that the interagency departments would put their acts together and say, we are ready, because until now, all of us, sa Committee on Labor, Committee on Women, and now Committee on, ng Blue Ribbon, hindi ho natin makita yung exact figures. How many workers are there? And we are only talking about legal workers.
If I may,
Yes.
Mr. President and colleagues in the Senate, I'd imagine, I suggested this a long time ago. Why are we allowing the Chinese? Because they speak Chinese. But as far as I'm concerned, I was willing to give them 2 years to teach us Chinese, so we take over. But the value of teaching Chinese to our people can be utilized no longer in POGO, but for other things, to interpret what the Chinese policy is, and to interpret what our intelligence can make, read their newspapers. We could have taken advantage of this. Now, they've had enough time. I think it's time to go, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, we have been saying this. We are not against foreign workers going to the country. If there are foreign workers working in the country, it's because no one is able, capable, or willing to do that particular job. And we welcome foreign workers. In fact, we have a bill here in the Senate to come up with a mechanism to ensure that when they are working here, they will be able to transfer the knowledge, the technical know-how to our kababayan, so that someday our kababayans can do the job. In fact, TESDA is offering LSI. We have 40 plus language skills institute where we can train our people and speak Chinese. So these are the things that we wanted to focus on, Mr. President, distinguished colleague. But let me ask our distinguished colleague, because he knows very well about all these shenanigans going on. May we know from the distinguished gentleman if he is aware of any studies conducted by the Anti-Money Laundering Council to analyze covered and suspicious transactions involving POGO, POGO operator, and POGO service providers, because I think it's important to also note that there are about 59 total POGOs. And of the 59 total POGOs, Mr. President, only 11 are Philippine-based. 48 are offshore. And then there are about 229 service providers. So may I ask the distinguished gentleman if we have some sort of information from the AMLA Council regarding this particular issue?
Actually, Mr. President, I don't want to insult ANLA, but their silence is deafening. I mean, I would imagine that they would be more aggressive in telling us that this is a problem that we can do something about. Just as Senator Dillon said, policy has to be made, Mr. President, because they can only do so much, no? But nonetheless, I am not familiar with any study, and I hope you can share that study with me so I can use that when we start conducting the investigation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I promise the majority leader that I won't take long. I have several information here that I will share with the distinguished gentleman from Cavite. I would just like to point out once again, Mr. President, in the last year alone, there are about 6,678 illegal foreign workers. Just last year, 6,678 illegal foreign workers. And these workers are working in these POGO service providers na nakakuha po ng lisensya sa PAGCOR. And that's so disheartening, Mr. President. And in addition to the 6,678 illegal foreign workers last year, there are 733 international fugitives na nahuli po at nandito na sa ating bansa. And so, again, I'd like to commend the distinguished gentleman for rising up today, and I would join him in his quest to unveil this wicked shenanigans perpetrated by POGO operators. He made mention a while ago about the non-payment of taxes. The BIR already stated, you talk about withholding taxes, corporate income tax, VAT, value-added tax, etc., amounting to 50 billion pesos, Mr. President. Ito ho yung mga hindi nababayad. And kanina binanggit po ng ating kasamahan, yung tungkol po dun sa franchise tax. 5% po ang sinasabi ng batas. Pero mismong PAGCOR, hindi ho makatulong sa BIR para hanapin ito at ma-require sila na magpagbayad. So, again,
Tapos
I'd
taas
like-
tayo ng taas ng tax. Tapos yung sitira, tatanggalin pa nila yung mga tax doon sa kwan. Eh di mababawasan tayo ng trabaho. Di ba? Sorry.
Yan po yung concern natin, Mr. President. And again, I'd like to thank the gentleman from Zambales for exposing this particular issue. And I join him in his quest to address this sickening problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, one final point before Senator Risa speaks up. There's the other problem that I'd like to see here, and I'd like to be part of the investigation. How many people die and how many people assume the identity of that person who died? When we were kids, I remember the Taiwanese were very, very famous for doing that. Somebody dies, and the identity is assumed by somebody. Why are you pointing at Senator Gatchalian? He's an original, natural-born resident dyan. You know, Senator Subiri is out of line, Mr. President. I'm sorry, no. This is important. I just want to be sure, that we are able to take a look at that, because I've been getting text messages saying that some people are assuming the identity of the person who died. I'm sorry, Pia. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just defending you from this, from Darth Vader over there. Go ahead.
Senator Ontiveros, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dalawang punto sa isang maikling manifestation, konkretong halimbawa nung sinabi ng gentleman from Zambales about working together, and the narrative sketched for us by the minority leader. Yung isang magandang nakita po natin dito sa Senado in the past several months ay synergy among different Senate committees looking into the policy issues nitong POGO operations. Sinimulan ng Senate Committee on Labor kay Chair Senator Joel sa labor at saka sa tax evasion issues. Sinundan nung Senate Committee on Women and Children, chaired by this representation, mga issues din naman ng trafficking, prostitution, illegal recruitment din, at pag-corrupt sa Bureau of Immigration. At ngayon, ang Blue Ribbon Committee, chaired by the gentleman from Zambales, na titignan pa, bubuin yung lumalawak na eksena, titignan yung mga issues ng money laundering at national security at iba pang strains sa ating lipunan. So I think, Mr. President, and this goes to my second and last point sa aking maikling manifestation, this will, I think, is creating some kind of a possible momentum dito sa loob ng Senado. Tignan yung sinabi ni Minority Leader, the policy question, kung itutuloy pa ba talaga or hindi na ba itutuloy yung POGO operations. Lastly, Mr. President, in aid of that policy exploration, we will recall na nung tinigil ng PAGCOR yung pag-issue ng mga bagong POGO franchises, this was even welcomed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Sinabi nung spokesman nila noon that they welcome PAGCOR's no longer issuing new POGO franchises, at sinabi pa nila na they are hoping that the Philippine government will cease POGO operations altogether. Similar sa nangyari po prior that sa bansang Cambodia. So thank you, Mr. President.
I would like to thank the gentle lady and for kind comments, as well as the interventions by the Minority Floor Leader and the gentleman from Bulacan. I just want to say that at the beginning, Mr. President, we started this investigation, as correctly stated by Senator Villanueva, when we handled POGO going from Santa Ana to Clark, and that's where this whole thing started. It never ends, Mr. President, and it will not end. Thank you very much,
Mr. President, before we refer the speech of the good gentleman from Zambales, Mr. President, I'd just like to ask the good gentleman from Zambales, Senator Gordon, are we allowed to bring in male-maletang pera sa bansa? Because if you go to other countries, and I'd like to ask Senator Gordon this,
Declare.
if you go to other countries, you have a maleta full of, let's say, $1 million, you go into the United States, Mr. President, even if you declare it, they will hold you, because that could be drug money. You have to show proof of your income. If you're Jeff Bezos, if you are the owner of Macintosh, si Bill Gates, and the other billionaires, pwede po yun. Pero if you are just an ordinary citizen bringing $1 million into the United States, unless you show proof of income, Mr. President, hindi talaga sila papayag nun. Talaga i-red flag ka nun. I'm sure they will detain you. You do that in Europe, they will detain you. Because they know it's either racketeering money, RICO money, or what you call racketeering, you get this money illegally through laundering. So,
Member-
Mr. President, I just want to ask, wala bang protocol ang ating Bureau of Customs pagdating sa airport natin pag may nakita silang ganong karaming pera na dala-dala ng isang tao?
Reminds me of the Euro generals.
That's correct.
Yes. But the Euro generals, Mr. President, was detained. And their money was confiscated.
Correct, that's right.
How come, what happened here with us?
Well,
Mr. President?
two questions, two answers. Number one, the answer to that is in America, if you bring $1 million and you say, I declare the progeny of my, the money that I'm bringing in, they will let you go. But you have to declare. Maybe they'll let you go a second time. But here, if you were looking at the presentation, every other day, money was coming in, and one guy brought in, I think, for 47 times, millions and millions of dollars. I'm sure he would have been arrested by the FBI. That's where the lacuna in the law occurs, whether we should now allow Customs, what is their protocol? Customs reported it to Central Bank, and they said, I don't know. They have not given to us what they have done about it. They just filed one case of non-declaration, but the rest of the declared amounts were never pursued.
My goodness.
And there's a second point.
Unbelievable.
Never mind.
Second.
I'll get it down later.
What
Yeah,
is the
Mr. President.
second answer? He's not finished.
Yes, Mr. President. Well, mine is maybe we come out to sense of the Senate. You know, maybe it is God-given that China is actually canceling their passports. Why don't we encourage them to cancel all the passports of these POGO workers here so that they all go home? They'll do the job for us.
Well,
By
the
canceling their
gentleman-
passports, Mr. President, I personally would be one with my colleagues if that is a sense of the Senate, that asking the government of China to clamp down on their compatriots working supposed to be illegally here because it's an illegal activity in China, Mr. President.
The gentleman will be having a hearing on Thursday, I understand, and perhaps
Yes,
after that,
President.
we can come up with that resolution. Senator Gordon, yes?
As a point of final information, Mr. President. This is just Manila. They come into Clark.
Subic,
They come into, they didn't, they don't have any Subic.
by boat, wala.
Airport,
Cebu, how about
Cebu,
Cebu?
Davao. They go everywhere, Mr. President. And this is, Bukidnon, wala pa, Mr. President.
Walang
Bukid pa lang yun, Bukid pa.
Malapit na airport, pag may airport na.
But, Mr. President, I just want to raise the alarm bells. This is just Manila. We don't know what's going on in other areas, and that's why we have to really find out what's going on. Thank you, Mr.
All
President.
right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr.
Was it
President, I
you-
move that we,
Was it you, Senator Gordon, or Senator Villanueva, who said there were 300-something criminals that entered?
Senator Villanueva.
700
733 international fugitives.
that entered.
Yes.
Where are they now?
Well, some of them were already deported. Some of them were detained, Mr. President.
Oh, you should bring them to North Korea. Senator Pangilinan,
Some of them are back already.
Yes, Mr. President, just a manifestation of how serious and how massive the problem is. If the committees in the Senate would look into the many laws that have been violated, I think all the committees will be conducting hearings. Labor law, tax law, immigration law, banking laws,
Malaki naman yun eh.
anti-graft, anti-trafficking of women, anti-money laundering, anti-kidnapping, local ordinances, passport laws, gambling laws, national security. Lahat ho nung committee natin sa Senado, iimbestigahan lahat ng mga batas na
dinabag nila.
na binabaliwala ng POGO operations.
Including
I join the majority leader. If there is a sense of the Senate resolution, Mr. President, we will support it.
All
Thank you
right.
very much,
That
Mr.
will include the Committee on Games.
Yes, Mr. President,
No,
absolutely.
except the Committee on Sports.
Inside the lounge, Mr. President, before I refer the speech, inside the lounge, we were discussing and saying that imagine the last year alone, or 2 years already, we've been discussing problems due to POGO in almost every week of our sessions.
Really?
Every session week, we've been having hearings from different committees, of the different committees of the Senate. So this must be really significant in terms of laws that have been bypassed by this new industry, Mr. President. It's something that's quite alarming, and we should look into.
All right.
Mr. President,
So-
with that, I move to refer
Refer.
the committee of the distinguished gentleman from Zambales to the
Excuse-
speech, rather, of the good gentleman to the Blue Ribbon Committee, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I spoke, I said motu proprio, I was going to do that, but I thank my good friend, Senator Subiri, for.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none. So referred.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move, first of all, we'd like to thank the sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano of the Sitira measure, because we accommodated her on the speech of the good gentleman from Zambales. So we thank her for her patience. So now, Mr. President, we move to consider Senate Bill number 1357 under Committee Report number 5050.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of 1357 is in order.
Mr. President, may we recognize the sponsor, Senator Pia S. Cayetano, and to interpolate the distinguished gentleman from Cavite, Francis Tol Tolentino.
The distinguished lady from Taguig and Pateros is recognized. And to interpolate the gentleman from Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino. Alis na si Joel.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are ready when the gentleman from Cavite is ready.
Mr. President, will the good sponsor yield to some clarificatory questions? Konti lang po ito, Mr. President.
Yes, of course, we thank the gentleman for taking time to study it and pose questions so we can also help clarify any issues.
Mr. President, just to jumpstart the Sitira bill, which I think is very vital insofar as the country's tax reform program is concerned, I would be asking just some policy questions, Mr. President, and it has nothing to do with the incentives. As I've read your the good sponsorship speech, the second part is relative to the incentives. I would focus, Mr. President, on the policy considerations why we are having the Sitira law and the exact rationale for this. Mr. President, nakita ko marami pala akong bills for consideration today, kaya igsian ko na to. May I ask directly from the good sponsor, what is the real rationale for the Sitira law, insofar as the corporation is concerned?
Well, for the corporations, what we're trying to do is to align with our Asian neighbors, where they are offering where the current corporate income tax rate is much lower. So our objective is to get to that lower level, but at a speed that is manageable, no, for our fiscal managers. So it's 1% deduction per year. So from the current 30%, if we pass it law this year, it's supposed to be 29, next year 28, 27, until it goes all the way down to 20% by the year 2030.
I promise the good sponsor that I will have no more than 5 questions, but I have a slide presentation to show, Mr. President. Can we have this? Can we enlarge this, similar to the request of Senator Gordon a while ago? If you look at the slide, Mr. President, it appears that the Philippines right now has a corporate tax base rate of 30%. Indonesia has 25%. Malaysia has 24%. Vietnam has 20%. And Singapore has 17%. Sa palagay po ba ng ating good sponsor, Mr. President, talagang malayong-malayo ang Pilipinas doon sa mga nabanggit kong ASEAN neighbors, specifically Indonesia. Tingnan niyo po ang Indonesia, 25%, but their GDP is higher than the Philippines. The per capita income, can you enlarge that? is even higher than the Philippines, with 25% corporate tax, and the Philippines having 30% right now. Is it really a big gap when you say the rationale is to harmonize and more or less equalize those of our neighboring ASEAN countries, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, having chaired this committee for the last few months, I will focus on my response by simply saying that this is one of the factors that is mentioned. Many factors are mentioned as to why what we can do to improve our economy, what we can do to improve the investors, the number of investors coming in and the amounts coming in. There's a lot of reasons, and one of them would be this. So this is not the only thing we need to address, but it is one of the things. And therefore, being at the highest would definitely be something that we can work on. That's why the goal is to bring it lower. And based on the numbers you have, we would now be very attractive because we would be one of the lowest.
And I agree with the good sponsor that competitiveness will not just be measured by the amount of corporate income
Yes.
tax rate that a country implements.
No.
But looking at the figures, Mr. President, can we have the entire slide shown? Can I request the technical? Pag nakita po natin dito, Mr. President, it appears that, and I'm now, if the good sponsor will allow me to be more advanced in my interpolation, because we will be reaching this stage in the days ahead,
Okay.
or perhaps in the years ahead. And I intimated to the good sponsor that I'll be approaching this in a holistic manner, including perhaps the package 4, Mr. President, if the good sponsor would agree. So it would appear that from this year, if it is approved, we will go down by 1%, and thereby, after 5 years, when this is supposed to be suspended, we will reach the level of Indonesia at 25%. Am I correct?
Just a clarification in the statement you made. It will not be, the statement is not it will be suspended, but the President, upon the recommendation of
suspend.
DOF, if certain conditions are present, may suspend.
I stand corrected. If we look at the slide, which is I think oversimplified, if we look at the corporation, a corporation would have an income, would derive an income, its income, in two ways. One is through what you call your earned surplus, the income from the ordinary mode of doing business, and another way is by issuing stocks. So I'm now focusing, Mr. President, on dividends. If you look closely at the figures reflecting our ASEAN neighbors, it would appear, Mr. President, that our successful neighbors, Malaysia, they have a 0% dividends tax. The same is true with Singapore, 0%. Vietnam, for corporate, 0 corporate tax. For individuals, 5%, Mr. President. For the Philippines, our current dividend tax is 10%. If we look at the whole package, we will end up 15%. Am I correct?
Yes,
Ipita.
but let me explain, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, you will notice that there are figures, there's an amendment on the dividends. For those who were in the Senate in the last Congress, and I was not, this was, well, I was in the lower house, but I was not privy to all these details. There was already an amendment made in the train law such that domestic corporations were already, they already changed the rate for domestic corporations. And that is why here in Sitira, this is part of the housekeeping that I had mentioned in caucus, because the tax for the non-resident corporations was overlooked, and so we are now just aligning it with non-resident foreign corporations. Was overlooked, and so it's just being aligned with the tax rate for the domestic corporations. So if we can clean this up, then they will be at the same rate. But then, when we tackle PIFITA, if there is any desire to change the whole thing, that would be the right place to do it.
Yes.
Ideally, just to be orderly.
Yes, that's why I ask your indulgence if I can
Yes, take this
be
up
more
now.
futuristic relative to this, but to focus on residents, individuals, it is now 10%.
Yes.
Correct.
Dividend tax.
Dividend tax. And if package 4 is approved, it will be 15%. Am I correct?
In PIFITA, the proposed rate, Your Honor, is correct, 15% for all.
So my question, Mr. President, is if we are really trying to align ourselves with our successful ASEAN neighbors, why don't we have a 0% similar to Malaysia or 0% similar to Singapore, Mr. President?
In other, okay. When we discuss PIFITA, we will show that based on how DOF proposes it, there are various tax rates, and at the end of the day, there will be some that go up, there will be some that go down, and they are hoping that it is viewed overall as competitive.
I agree, Mr. President.
But we can go through each one. I do appreciate the point that His Honor is making, because if we look at it apples for apples, we will see that medyo mataas atin dito, no? So I would also like to see it, the bigger picture, so we do not overlook anything, Mr. President.
I agree, Mr. President. I'm not speculating on what will transpire relative to the hubris of PIPITA or Package 4, but it is an accepted theory, and in practice, and it's being practiced by corporations, that whenever the dividends tax for shareholder is significantly lower, Mr. President, than the corporate tax, it serves as an incentive for the corporation to declare dividends.
Yes.
Am I correct?
It would seem logical.
Yes. So the policy question now is this: are we in favor, or do we encourage the individual shareholders to get their individual shares through the declaration of dividends, or are we in favor of the corporation having retained earnings, Mr. President? Because we will be having a great economic consequence thereafter, Mr. President.
I was going to hazard a guess without asking our in-house expert, Yusek Carl, and I'm happy to report that my guess is the same as his expert opinion, that it's a balance that we are looking for, the balance. So we want to encourage, it's a balance between encouraging retained earnings so that they reinvest the money, but we also want to reward investors for putting in their money in corporations and supporting the growth of industry. So you want both to have a positive what do you call this, activities going on.
Mr. President, I probably would beg to disagree and be clarified further, because as it appears, and if this is all approved, what will happen is that the corporation will not be declaring dividends, retaining the income, accumulated income, and the shareholders will have lesser money to spend. And in terms of consumption, Mr. President, di po ba mas mainam na mas maraming perang ginagastos sa ekonomiya kesa po sa nakatago lang hawak-hawak ng isang korporasyon?
But Mr. President, I'd like to point out that corporate income tax is going down, no? So
Yes.
right now it's 30. So mas malaki ang there's a big difference between the corporate income tax and the dividend tax. But over time, they will tend to be at the same, closer.
So, 5% difference after
Yes.
20 years, but that's 20 years from now, following the explanation you gave during your sponsorship speech. But I'm looking ahead at what will happen 5 years from now. we will have corporations
25.
holding on to their
And then
incomes,
dividend
retaining
income
it,
tax will be
and at the same
15.
time, Mr.
So
President,
10%
we have an improperly accumulated earnings tax, IAET, of 10%, which the good sponsor is now proposing to increase to 15%. Pag humawa ka ng pera na hindi mo ginagastos sa corporation, ng matagal, exceeding your capital, ay matatax ka pa ng 15%. So if you add 20% plus 15%, it is now 35%. Mas mataas pa ho, Mr. President, doon sa existing corporate tax na 30% ngayon before Sitira, Mr. President. Am I correct?
Well, Mr. President, the first thing I need to emphasize is that my immediate objective, DOF's immediate objective, and therefore mine right now, is to equalize the difference between the tax for the domestic corporation and the non-resident foreign, because right now there is that difference where there should really be no difference at all, not even being, there's no tax policy that justifies them having a difference. So the immediate objective now under Sitira is to equalize that. Again, the objective was in PIFITA later on. We can review that. And when I say later on, actually, the Senate President has been urging me to fast track it so we can also have it on the floor. Technically, we could also be doing it. It will just be done under a different committee report. Because your points are all well taken. It's just that the immediate objective now is to equalize it. So to just bring it back to where the current law is.
Yeah,
because,
yes.
yes, just that. And then His Honor's points on what would be the best long-term rate, then we're very open to suggestions, but this is the committee recommendations.
Yes, because, Mr. President, when I do the math, and I'm not very good in mathematics, when I do the math, under the current system, the corporate income tax is 30%, the dividends tax when issued to individuals is 10%, and if you total it, though we have a different taxing object, is 40%, and under your proposal, the corporate income tax after 20 years would be 20%, and the dividends tax...
After 10 years.
After 10 years, and the dividends tax would be 15%, and if you add that, that would be 35%. So halos pareho lang po, Mr. President, but if you add the accumulated earnings tax, baka mas malaki pa ho kasi you'll add another 15%. So doing our math, baka, and looking at the entire ASEAN universe, baka mas lugi pa ho tayo, Mr. President. Am I correct?
Currently, ma'am, the corporate is 30, dividends 10, so 30% is we're lowering the corporate back to 20 and the dividend up to 20 years. So 20%
Yeah. So basically, Mr. President, with the current proposals, we will still end up lower than we are right now. Because right now, corporate income tax is 30, and the proposal is to make it 30 and 10, so that's 40 together. And eventually, it should be at 20 and 15. So it's still lower in the long run. Maybe not as low as His Honor would like. And like I said, we're very open to proposals. We're happy to review the figures, but that is the current situation. Or
Thank
current
you.
proposal.
Thank you, good sponsor. Again, I go to the basics. It appears that we will be perpetrating, institutionalizing an indirect double tax system, double taxation system. Because we tax the corporation prior to the issuance of dividends, and at the same time, after the issuance of dividends, we tax again the shareholders. And then, if we tax the corporation for not issuing the dividends, declaring the dividends, we tax them through the accumulated earnings tax. That's triple taxation, no longer double taxation, Mr. President. So the minority leader is agreeing, and nothing is said. And also the majority leader.
Mr. President, just to clarify, our intercorporate dividend is also zero. So His Honor has there, it says domestic corporation zero. That reflects the intercorporate dividend zero. So pare-pareho ho tayong zero. We are
And now I'm
competitive.
referring, Mr. President, to individuals.
Yes, for individuals, we do have a tax rate of 10 now, and it's going to be 15. In other countries, there are also tax rates. It's not zero. So some are zero and some are higher.
The reason, Mr. President, why I'm raising this with the indulgence of the good sponsor is that the Congress, spearheaded by the Senate, recently passed a new law relative to corporations. And this has something to do with the individual organizing a corporation himself, by himself, as the lone shareholder and having a separate, distinct personality as a corporation. Baka mas maguluhan po ako dito pag kinumpute ko ngayon, Mr. President, kasi individual sole member yon because I used to study before, yung sole corporation happens to be just a religious corporation. Now you have a sole corporation allowed to engage in commercial activities, Mr. President. So in terms of the individual corporation, probably we'll have a different approach relative to this because the corporation as a separate entity would be declaring dividends to the lone shareholder, the lone member. So this is very confusing, Mr. President. That's why I promised the good sponsor that I'll stick to just 5 questions. Pero
Mr.
last
President,
na po.
we are happy to look at that. They are very interesting points. I consider myself a student as well. I appreciate the points raised. I've asked DOF to also show us if other countries treat sole corporations different from regular corporations with other members.
Yes, Mr. President. One final question, Mr. President, because I think I still have other bills to be
Sponsor.
considered and sponsor. Let me refer the good sponsor to Article 6, Section 29 of the Constitution, which mandates that Congress should evolve a progressive system of taxation. And from the way things are, and it's not just for this CITIRA law, it appears, Mr. President, that our corporate tax system is regressive. It is not progressive, Mr. President, because it is not based on the corporation's ability to pay. Remember, Mr. President, that Congress passed several laws before. You have laws giving incentives to micro enterprises, barangay and micro enterprises, small corporations. Bakit hindi po natin gawin, Mr. President? The tax rate of the corporation must be based on the corporation's ability to pay. Kung magkano po yung kaya niyang kitain, similar to the individual. Meron pong corporation na malaki ang kinikita, merong corporation na mahina, malaking kinikita. I'm not referring to POGO, which was described a while ago. So why don't we base it on the corporation's ability to pay to comply with the constitutional fiat that Congress should evolve a progressive system of taxation?
Mr. President, that was one of the questions I asked early on when we were reviewing this at the hearing committee level. And I am aware that we already have put mechanisms in place to support the growth of smaller industries, no? So that they are still starting, their income is less, and so that's why we have separate taxation rate for micro businesses. They are taxed at a flat rate of 8% if their income does not reach a certain level. So we already provide for that, for precisely the scenario that His Honor is referring to. There are reasons why the DOF does not recommend that we have a scale going down. They've particularly, well, actually, not just this administration, previous administrations have specifically identified micro corporations, businesses to support them, but asked to recommend that when we look at the tax rate, we change it depending on the income. There are various reasons why they are not recommended. It presents the opportunity for arbitrage whether firms are taxed by size or by profits. Big firms will incorporate into smaller firms. That has been seen to happen. They'll break themselves up so that they would fall under smaller firms. They would be defined as smaller firms. If I may use an analogy, this happened in the small scale mining, something like that, if I may use it by analogy. Profitable firms will resort to transfer pricing and more opportunities for firms to adjust their books to achieve lower net taxable income. And in the end, it does not encourage firms to grow big because of the higher tax rate. And what we do, what is one of the clear policies is really, in fact, that we push for a lot of our micro companies to grow into the bigger companies. So that is those are basically the considerations for not recommending a multiple level type of taxation. And then just to respond on the constitutional issue, the constitutional provision, the mandate is actually for the entire tax system and not just one tax alone. So it is very common to see in different jurisdictions that there are corporate income tax with flat rates and also allow for personal income tax to be progressive.
So in effect, Mr. President, what the good sponsor is saying is that if you have a progressive system of taxation vis-a-vis corporations, it would not be good for the economy because we will be, pardon the term, we will be transformed into a kibbutz system, many corporations, enterprises operating, and you will not have that bigness that probably the good sponsor is alluding to. Mr. President, one last point, I forgot, relative to the retained earnings.
Yes.
Isn't it a fact that if you allow a corporation to hold on to big retained earnings, though it might be subject to a 15% tax as proposed by the good sponsor, there is a big possibility that the board of directors or some officers would just convert this into huge honoraria, salaries, to the detriment of the shareholders, because that would be a deductible corporate expense. Again, if we tie things up, baka hindi po mas makatulong ito sa ekonomiya, kaya ang sinasabi ko po kanina, dapat po talaga mababa itong dividends tax, or kagaya po ng Malaysia and Singapore, zero for individuals.
Well, actually, Mr. President, our corporation code has a limit on retained earnings. So that in itself is a safeguard against just using the funding, using the earnings arbitrarily. So that's a built-in safeguard that we have. But I understand his honor's point. The point being is to make the declaration of dividends as liberal as possible. And we will continue to look into this and look at the bigger picture. But as I said, the best place to do that is in the committee report of PIFITA, the other package, where we can also see all the other sources of income and taxation. So we can all see the bigger picture, because that is really what DOF is presenting to us, the bigger picture, not just one tax at a time.
Yes, Mr. President. That's why I asked the permission of the good sponsor that I will also include in my interpellation future tax reform bills under consideration by the Committee on
Yes, and we
Ways
appreciate
Means.
it because you give us a heads up on your concern on that measure.
Yes, Mr. President, I promised the good sponsor that I will just ask 5 questions because there are a lot of bills to be tackled by this chamber. So I suspend my interpellation and look
Thank
forward
you.
to having my interpellation relative to the incentives.
Thank you very much, Mr.
given to
President.
the
We always
corporations.
appreciate the questions of the good senator from Cavite. Salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues, before I suspend consideration, yes, just for the sponsor to take note as well, being a businessman myself, it's a bit steep when you discuss dividend taxes of 15%, because we feel we're overly taxed. At 30 plus 10, when you think about it, plus your salary withheld, so we really don't really get much. So, yeah, maybe that's something we can consider later on, Mr. President, with the, of course, I believe Senator Ralph will be taking that up on I believe, on dividends tax.
Yeah.
I think we would encourage more investments, Mr. President, if we are similarly situated to Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore, where they actually put zero dividends tax on individuals. Maybe not zero, but definitely 15 is a bit too steep. Because we feel, Mr. President, I feel that we're overly paying taxes.
Mr. President, for the record, that was, again, as I said, that was passed in the train law already. So all we are
Yes.
doing now is equalizing the rate for the non-resident and resident foreign corporations, because the tax rate is already 15 by virtue of train for domestic corporations. Kaya nyo lang nakikita to ngayon is because naiwan yan by omission lang. So I'm just equalizing it. So my point simply is the Congress has decided on that. It's not something that I'm proposing. This is
Yes.
actually for resident, non-resident corporations, because the domestic corporation was already, kumbaga, pinatay, if you feel na nakakapatay yun, pinatay na kayo nung train pa lang.
Yeah,
Sorry to
absolutely,
put it
Mr.
that way. Naglilinis, naghuhugas ng kamay.
Mabigat na sa mga small and medium enterprises.
Mr. President, it was, tas may naghuhugas din ng kamay sa tabi ko, it was not a DOF proposal, it was a Senate proposal.
Yeah, because
hugasan
actually
na
it
tayo ng
affects-
kamay ngayon.
Although corporate income tax will go down, but if you think about it, when you have corporate income tax, the funds are still under the corporation's name. If you're going to dividend, that's a dividend. We cannot release that to the owners. You cannot just release it to the owners without paying further taxes. So to release that amount is dividends tax. So
Yes,
nadodoble ang
dividend tax.
Yes.
Dividend tax.
Hindi sa parang single proprietorship na when you're paying or individual, if you're an individual business operator or businessman, single proprietorship, pag bayad mo sa income tax, yun na yun.
Yes,
Basically,
yes.
you can keep the income. But for corporations, which is the vast majority of small, medium, and
Yes,
large
they
enterprises,
have a corporation as their vehicle.
may dividends pa ulit
Yes.
yun. So medyo madugo, Madam Chair. So
Yeah.
at the proper time,
At
we
the
can
proper time,
discuss
and what
that.
I'll also do is I'll prepare the history para pag nagturuan tayo ng kamay kung saan galing yon. Claro. I'm just saying that this is not something that your representation studied,
Yes,
because
yes.
this was housekeeping, that I will be accountable for everything else, but there's a number of housekeeping provisions that I am just inserting to mirror what was passed in train.
Yes.
But obviously, I will be happy to respond to questions, and if there's a need to change, my request is we'll do it in PIFITA, but at the end of the day, as long as you all see the bigger picture, we can do whatever the body wants.
Yes.
Thank you very much for
Thank
pointing
you very
those
much
things
to
out.
dear sponsor. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to study the measure further, we move to suspend consideration of the same.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, there are my visitors are here now from the beautiful town of Manolo Fortich, Northern Bukidnon. Our SK chairman, headed by Councilor John Layson, are here with us on the right side.
All right, we welcome our guests to the Senate this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have local bills to tackle with the permission of the body. We have a few congresswomen and women here waiting as well for these local bills. With the permission of the body, with the permission of the body, Mr. President, I move that we consider House Bill number 1477 under Committee Report number 54 and recognize the sponsor, Senator Christopher Bongo.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order. Senator Bongo is recognized. Gentleman from Davao.
Mr. President, there being no member who wishes to interpolate the measure, it's just increasing a bed capacity of a regional hospital. I move that we close the period of interpolation.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of interpolation is closed.
Mr. President, I move to open the period of amendments and recognize the good sponsor for any amendments.
Senator Bongo is recognized for the period of amendments.
Mr. President, the committee submits the following amendments on House Bill 1477, Caraga Regional Hospital. Number 1, on page 1, line 1, between the words "the" and Caraga, insert the phrase "authorized bed capacity of the. On the same page, lines 3.
Uh, Can we wait a while? Kopya namin.
We suspend.
Comma, dash, di ba? Lines, dash. Hindi niya na, di pa.
All right. Motion to adopt the proposed amendment. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted. Go ahead, proceed.
On the same page, lines 3 to 4, delete the phrase upgraded into a tertiary level hospital and its authorized bed capacity. Thus, section 1 as amended shall now read as follows. Section 1, the authorized bed capacity of the Caraga Regional Hospital located in the Barangay Washington, Surigao City, Province of Surigao del Norte is hereby increased from 150 to 500 beds. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 2, on page 2, lines 1 to 2, delete the phrase for a period of 2 years from the approvals inconsistent with this act are hereby repealed or modified accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On the title of the bill, delete the phrase upgrading the Caraga Regional Hospital in Barangay Washington, Surigao City, Surigao del Norte into a tertiary level hospital. Between the words increasing and bed, delete the word its and replace it with the word the. Moreover, between the words capacity and from, insert the phrase of the Caraga Regional Hospital in Barangay Washington, Surigao City, Surigao del Norte. Thus, the title of the bill as amended shall now read as follows. An act increasing the bed capacity of the Caraga Regional Hospital in Barangay Washington, Surigao City, Surigao del Norte from 150 to 500 beds and appropriating funds thereof. I so move, Mr. President.
Therefore. Funds,
No.
therefore.
No, therefore,
Yes. All right. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
no further amendments, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the sponsor, if we can be made co-sponsors as well, all members present today. If it's all right with the good sponsor.
Yes.
If we can be made co-sponsors. Kasi Caraga, Mindanao.
Bisaya.
Okay, with
Yeah,
the affirmative, Mr. President.
Yes, he nodded his head in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Oh, because I remember Senator Arturo Tolentino before.
Yes,
When
Mr.
Senator Gloria Macapagal wanted to be a co-sponsor, Senator Tolentino said no.
Matindi pala si Senator
Oh,
Tolentino.
yes.
nung panahon.
My
Pero
answer
mas
is,
mabait si...
That was
ano,
Turing Tolentino,
Yeah, mas
not
mabait si
Francis.
Tol
Oh.
Tolentino.
Right.
I'll
Yung
change my
anak ko.
answer to go.
Go.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, we move to
so
close.
recorded.
We move to close the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the period of amendments is closed.
Mr. President, with that, I move that we approve second reading House Bill number 1477. So moved.
Second reading?
Yes, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. House Bill 1477 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to suspend consideration of the same.
Consideration of measures suspended.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of House Bill number 5871 under Committee Report number 55.
5871, any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
Once again, may we recognize the sponsor. There being no other members to interpolate this measure, we move to close the period of interpolation.
Senator Christopher Bongo is the sponsor. Any objection on the closing of the period of interpolation? Hearing none, so closed.
Mr. President, we move to open, with the permission of the body, the period of amendments and recognize the sponsor for amendments.
Period of amendments is open. Senator Bongo is recognized.
Mr. President, the committee submits the following amendments. Number 1, on page 1, line 6, between the words the and bed, insert the phrase increase in the. On the same page,
Any objection? Hearing none.
on the same page, lines 8 to 9, delete the phrase "that shall be prepared by the DOH." I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 2, on page 2, line 1, insert the 2 new sections which shall read as follows. Section 3, the DOH, in coordination with the Department of Budget and Management and the Civil Service Commission, and in consultation with the management of the hospital, shall determine the additional plantilla positions to be created and filled up in the workforce of the said hospital. Section 4, the chief of the hospital shall develop a hospital development plan to be submitted to the DOH to reflect the development goals of the hospital consistent with the increase in bed capacity and service capability. Requests for the staffing requirements, capital outlay investments, and budgetary needs for operations shall be based on the hospital development plan. Then, renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 3, on page 2, after line 8, insert 2 new sections which shall read as follows. Section 7, if any provision or part of this act is declared unconstitutional, the remaining parts or provisions not affected shall remain in full force and effect. Section 8, all laws and executive orders, issuances, rules, and regulations inconsistent with this act are hereby repealed or modified accordingly. Then, renumber the succeeding section accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
No further amendments, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
With that, I move to close the period of amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, the period of amendment is closed.
Mr. President, with that, move to approve on second reading House Bill number 5871 under Committee Report number 55.
Any objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 5871 is approved in second reading.
We'd like to congratulate also our distinguished colleague from the House of Representatives, Congresswoman Helen Tan, is here with us for representing the 4th District of Quezon Province. Congratulations, ma'am.
Welcome, Congresswoman Helen Tan, my party mate.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, we move to suspend consideration of the same for third reading.
Consideration measures suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 1799 and the Committee Report number 56.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measures in order.
Oh, before with that, Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Go, may we be made also co-sponsor of the previous measure?
Yes, and go.
Go, go, go. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, so recorded.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor of House Bill number 1799, and just for the record, no member wishes to interpolate the measure, Mr. President. With the permission of the body, move to close the period of interpolation.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of interpolation is closed.
Mr. President, the move to open the period of amendments and recognize the dear sponsor, Senator Go.
Senator POGOs is recognized for the period of amendments.
Mr. President, the committee submits the following amendments. Number 1, on page 1, line 2, between the words hereby and rename, insert the phrase upgraded into medical center, and between the words as and Cebu, insert the word the. Furthermore, after the word center, add a second sentence which shall read as follows. The medical center shall be under the supervision and control of the Department of Health. Thus, Section 1 as amended shall now read as follows. Section 1, the Talisay District Hospital in Talisay City, Province of Cebu is hereby upgraded into a medical center and renamed as the Cebu South Medical Center. The medical center shall be under the supervision and control of the Department of Health, DOH. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
Number 2, on page 2, after line 3, insert a new section which shall read as follows. Section 4, the chief of the medical center shall develop a hospital development plan to be submitted to the DOH to reflect the development goals of the hospital consistent with the increase in bed capacity and service capability as provided in sections 1 and 2 hereof. Requests for the staffing requirements, capital outlay, investments, and budgetary needs for operations shall be based on the hospital development plan, then renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 3, on the same page, after line 7, insert a new section which shall read as follows. Section 6, if any provision or part of this act is declared unconstitutional, the remaining parts or provisions not affected shall remain in full force and effect. Then renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On the same page, line 8, delete the phrase section 1 of. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 5, on the same page, line 11, after the word accordingly, insert a second sentence which shall read as follows. All laws, executive orders, issuances, rules, and regulations inconsistent with this act are hereby repealed or modified accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On the title of the bill, delete the word renaming and replace it with the word upgrading. Between the words into and Cebu, insert the phrase a medical center to be known as the. In addition, delete the phrase entitled an act establishing a district hospital in the municipality of Talisay, province of Cebu, to be known as the Talisay District Hospital. Thus, the title of the bill as amended shall now read as follows. An act upgrading the Talisay District Hospital in Talisay City, province of Cebu, into a medical center to be known as Cebu South Medical Center, amending for the purpose of Republic Act number 7799 and appropriating funds. Therefore, I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
No further amendments, Mr. President.
Move to close the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Hearing no objection, period of amendments closed.
Mr. President, move to approve on second reading. Before we do that, again, with the permission of our good sponsor, if we can be made co-sponsors, Mr. President. Is it all right?
Yes,
Thank you,
because
Mr.
you're also Bisaya.
All
That's
right,
sir. And the Senate President is from Cebu.
yes, of course.
That's why Vicente Soto Hospital is named after
You have
the
a
good
hospital there, Mr.
the
President.
biggest one.
Yes,
The first ever
named after my
Malasakit.
grandfather.
The first ever Malasakit Center.
Yes.
Yes, that's
Mr.
correct.
President, we move
All
to
right,
approve
so
on second
recorded.
reading.
All right.
House Bill number 1799.
Any objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 1799 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, move to suspend consideration of the same.
Consideration of measure suspended.
Mr. President, move to resume consideration of Senate Bill number 640, Mr. President.
640.
Yes, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there being no members who wish to interpolate the measure, move to terminate the period of interpolation.
Hearing no objection, period of interpolation is closed.
Move to open the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Period of amendments open.
May we recognize Senator Bongo for...
Senator Bongo is recognized.
Mr. President, the committee submits the following amendments. Number 1, on page 1, line 1, after the phrase Section 1, insert a title for Section 1, which shall read as follows. Increase in bed capacity. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 2, on the same page, lines 3 to 4, delete the phrase 5-year. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 3, on the same page, line 5, after the phrase Section 2, insert a title for Section 2, which shall read as follows. Upgrade of service facilities. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 4, on the same page, line 8, after the phrase Section 3, insert a title for Section 3, which shall read as follows. Increase in personnel. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none, adopted.
Number 5, on the same page, after line 11, insert a new Section 4, which shall read as follows. Section 4, Hospital Development Plan. The Chief of the BMC shall develop a hospital development plan to be submitted to the DOH to reflect the development goals of the hospital consistent with the increase in bed capacity and service capability as provided in sections 1 and 2 hereof. Requests for the staffing requirements, capital outlay investments, and budgetary needs for operations shall be based on the hospital development plan, then renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Number 6, on page 2, before line 15, insert a new section which shall read as follows. Section 6, separability clause. If any provision or part of this act is declared unconstitutional, the remaining parts or provisions not affected shall remain in full force and effect. Then renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Adopted.
No further amendments, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move to close the period of amendments.
Hearing no objection, period of amendments closed.
Mr. President, before I move, again, may I request a good sponsor, if I be made, or the members here be made co-sponsors of the measure, because my mother is also from Bicol, Mr. President.
You're from
Libon Albay.
Nationwide pala to. Yes, of course, Majority
Yes,
Floor
you
Leader.
can confirm with the doctors from the hospital. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that,
All
we
right,
move to
yes, go ahead.
approve on second reading Senate Bill number 640.
Hearing no objection, Senate Bill 640 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, move to suspend consideration of the same.
Consideration of the measure suspended.
Mr. President, before we act on a few sponsorships, I ask the permission of the Minority Leader just for sponsorship measures, but we need to do a additional reference of business. I
right.
so move, Mr. President.
All right. Is Congresswoman Helen Tan still the chairman of the Committee on Health in the House?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. President.
Oh, they'd better not replace her, huh?
Yes. Congratulations are in order, Mr.
Oh,
President.
the NPC will revolt.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Additional reference of business, Madam birthday celebrant.
Additional reference of business, committee reports. Committee report number 59, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House number 4583, introduced by Representatives Romualdo and Alvarez, entitled, An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years, the franchise granted to Broadcast Enterprises and Affiliated Media, Inc. under Republic Act number 8098 to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations in the Philippines, recommending its approval with amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 60, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House number 4584, introduced by Representatives Crisologo and Alvarez, entitled, An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years, the franchise granted to Crusaders Broadcasting System, Inc. under Republic Act number 8091, entitled, An Act Granting the Crusaders Broadcasting System, Inc. a franchise to construct, establish, operate, and maintain commercial radio and television broadcasting stations within the Philippines, recommending its approval with amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 61, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House number 5490, introduced by Representative Fortuno et al., entitled, An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years, the franchise granted to Bicol Broadcasting Systems, Inc. under Republic Act number 8092, entitled, An Act Granting the Bicol Broadcasting Systems, Inc. a franchise to establish, operate, and maintain commercial radio and television broadcasting stations in Region 5, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 62, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House number 4581, introduced by Representative Jimenez et al., entitled, An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years, the franchise granted to Golden Broadcast Professional, Inc. under Republic Act number 8025, entitled, An Act Granting the Golden Broadcast Professional, Inc. a franchise to construct, maintain, and operate a station for FM radio and television broadcasting in the island of Mindanao and expanding its coverage to the entire Philippines, recommending its approval with amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report Number 63, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House Number 4582, introduced by Representatives Sagarbaria and Alvarez, entitled, "An Act Renewing for Another 25 Years, the franchise granted to Gold Label Broadcasting System, Inc. under Republic Act Number 8087, entitled, An Act Granting to the Gold Label Broadcasting System, Inc. a franchise to establish, maintain, and operate radio and television broadcasting stations in Dumaguete City and other areas in the Visayas and Mindanao where frequencies and/or channels are still available for radio and television broadcasting," recommending its approval with amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report Number 64, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House Number 4463, introduced by Representatives Gonzalez and Alvarez, entitled, "An Act Extending for Another 25 Years, the franchise granted to First United Broadcasting Corporation, presently known as Global Satellite Technology Services, Inc., amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 8079 as amended, entitled, An Act Granting the First United Broadcasting Corporation a franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain for commercial purposes radio and television broadcasting stations anywhere in the Philippines and for other purposes," recommending its approval with amendment, sponsor Senator Poe.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, we just have a few local bills or franchise bills for sponsorship and then a couple of local bills, Mr. President. I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order. Mr. President, these are the franchise bills numbering 6. I believe there's an omnibus sponsorship for all 6. So like what we did with the local bills yesterday, Mr. President, I'll transfer them all. Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order House Bill number 4583, under Committee Report number 59, House Bill number 4584 under Committee Report number 60, House Bill number 5490 under Committee Report number 61, House Bill number 4581 under Committee Report number 62, and House Bill number 4582 under Committee Report number 63, and finally, House Bill number 4463 under Committee Report number 64.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we consider the said measures and ask the Secretary to read the short title of these measures. Mr.
The Secretary will read the short titles of the measures.
House Number 4583, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Broadcast Enterprises and Affiliated Media, Inc. House Number 4584, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Crusaders Broadcasting System, Inc. House Number 5490, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Bicol Broadcasting Systems, Inc. House Number 4581, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Golden Broadcast Professional, Inc. House Number 4582, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Gold Label Broadcasting System, Inc. House Number 4463, an act extending for another 25 years the franchise granted to First United Broadcasting Corporation, presently known as Global Satellite Technology Service, Inc.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we recognize to sponsor the measure Senator Francis Tolentino. But before that, may we recognize the good Minority Floor Leader.
Minority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, in view of the lateness of the hour, we manifest that we have no objection to having the sponsorship speeches be considered read into the records and just deliver us written copies of the sponsorship speech to save on time, Mr. President.
I agree with the good
What does the Majority
Floor
Leader
Mr.
say?
President. I completely agree with the Minority
All right.
Floor Leader, Mr.
So
President.
move.
So move.
Any objection?
Deemed as read, Mr. President.
Hearing none. Motion is approved. The sponsorship speeches are placed into the record.
That's, with that, Mr. President, we move to suspend consideration of the measures.
Consideration of the measures suspended.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 4961 under Committee Report number 38.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order.
The status is in the period of interpolation. Senator Drilon would like to interpolate our sponsor, Senator Francis Tolentino.
Senator Francis Tolentino, gentleman from Cavite, is recognized. The Minority Leader, Senator Frank Drilon, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor yield to a few questions?
Willingly, Mr. President, if I have to be apprised again, due to the number of bills for consideration today, may I have the exact number of the bill? The barangay.
It's
yeah.
the 4961, my apologies.
Willingly, Mr. President, to the good minority leader.
Mr. President, the creation of the barangay, the creation of the barangay, the power to create barangays is lodged, if I recall correctly, in the provincial board or in the city council, as the case may be. Is that a correct recollection, Mr. President, of the local government code?
Yes, Mr. President, under Section 385 of the Local Government Code, a barangay may be created, divided, merged, abolished, or its boundaries substantially altered by law or by an ordinance of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan or the Sangguniang Panglunsod or the Sangguniang Pambayan, as the case may be, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, can the good sponsor spread into the record why we are considering these barangays being created when, in fact, from the way the provision is being read, we have delegated this power to the barangay, to the provincial council and to the city council? Just for the record, Mr. President.
Mr. President, there appears to be a recognition that barangays created by virtue of Section 285 of the Local Government Code would create by law, by operation of law, a distinct juridical personality insofar as a new local government unit is concerned, is created, but the practice, Mr. President, in having congressional imprimatur insofar as barangays created by appropriate sanggunians is to enable the said barangay to be recognized in the roster of those, I'll be frank with this answer, allowed to receive the proportionate share of the internal revenue allotment, Mr. President.
Thank you for spreading that into the record, because indeed, as far as this representation is concerned, that is the real reason why we accommodate and approve creation of barangays by law, because the barangays created only by the provincial board and the city councils are not accorded the respect of sharing in the era. That is the reality down there, and it is only when it is created by law that the barangay, newly created barangay, would be given their share of the era. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Yes, Mr. President. And aside from that important allocation of internal revenue allotment, barangays given recognition by Congress are allowed to participate and be recognized by other agencies, specifically the SWD, in terms of other projects, and even the DILG. So it would now elevate the status of a locally created barangay.
All right,
Thank you to the
Majority
distinguished
Leader.
Minority Floor Leader. With that, Mr. President, we move to close the period of interpellation.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of interpellation is closed.
Mr. President, I move to open the period of amendments and recognize the sponsor.
Period of amendments open. Senator Francis Tolentino.
There being no amendments, Mr. President, we move to close the period of amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of amendments is closed.
And once again, Mr. President, if the sponsor will allow, if we could be made co-sponsors of the measure, our colleagues that are here on the floor.
Yes, Mr. President.
Although I'm not from the
He's,
Spanish committee,
yeah,
Mr.
he's the Francis of the Tolentino, not
Yes.
not Arturo. Oh.
The son of the great, hindi
He
pala,
said
the
yes.
son.
You know, the exact words of Turing Tolentino was, no, you make your own laws. That's in the journal of the Senate.
I never
Yes,
said no,
oh.
Mr. President.
Yes.
No, but fortunately, he's only saying that sponsor, co-sponsor.
Co-sponsor man lang,
Oh,
Mr.
not author.
Co-sponsor.
Yeah, all right.
At least
so,
to give importance to those who are here in the chamber, Mr.
yes,
President,
yes.
supporting.
That listen to him.
I cannot say. Thank you, Mr. President.
All
So, with that, Mr. President, move to approve on second reading House Bill number 4961.
Any objection? Hearing none. House Bill 4961 is approved on second reading.
Move to suspend consideration.
Consideration of measures suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 2998.
2998. Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order.
Rizal Capital Transfer. Yes, Mr. President, this is the transfer of the capital of seat of government, the province of Rizal, from the city of Pasig to Antipolo, which I think is a practical move, Mr. President. You interpolate? And then the sponsor and ourselves. Yeah, we'd like to recognize Senator Franklin Drilon to interpolate with the permission of the body, Senator Francis Tolentino.
All right, the parliamentary status, we're still in the period of interpellation. Senator Francis Tolentino is recognized. Senator Frank Drilon to interpolate.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have basically no objection to this measure. In fact, we endorse its passage. We just want to spread a few matters into the record because we ourselves are not certain of the situation. When was the province of Rizal created?
Mr. President, the province of Rizal was created June 11, 1901, by virtue of Act number 137, and I think it's headed by the former Judge William Howard Taft, who eventually became the President of the United States, Mr. President, from Cleveland, Ohio, Mr. President, a horseback riding guy who used to trail the blaze of Cannon Road in Baguio, Mr. President.
And
If my historical recollection is correct.
Yes. We wish to commend the good sponsor for having prepared well for this measure by being able to cite 1901 law. But under that 1901 law, Mr. President, Public Act number 137, is that the law which established the capital of the province as Pasig? Is that correct?
Mr. President, I'm not so familiar with the capital, whether it was Pasig during that time, but the act referred to the creation of a Morong Politico-Military District covering 33 towns, and that includes Caloocan, Makati, Valenzuela is part of Bulacan, you have Mandaluyong, Rizal, you have Las Piñas, Rizal, Parañaque, Rizal, and so on and so forth. But if my recollection is correct,
Section 6.
when Presidential Decree 824 was passed in 1975, that was when it was really it really produced a very administratively disjunctive situation, because several cities, LGUs, were removed from Rizal, but the capital was maintained in Pasig, Mr. President. I used to walk that area because I studied in a school walking distance to the capital. That's the Lourdes School of Mandaluyong, Mr. President.
So the whole mess, if I may call it as such, was created because of a PD 824, creating the Metro Manila, Metropolitan Manila, and included Pasig thereon. Is that correct, sir?
The Pasig was made part of
Metro Manila.
Metro Manila, but the capital was never transferred to Antipolo. So
Yes.
there was a de facto capital in Antipolo, Rizal, functioning as the capital, but the buildings, the seat of government, the governor was based in Pasig, Mr. President.
They call it the Capitolio.
Capitolio, Mr. President. Now the Commons, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Capital Commons.
under what enactment of Congress did Pasig become the capital of the province of Rizal?
I think, Mr. President, there was again, as cited by the good minority leader, there was an act which,
Yes.
an act, no batasan curative legislation passed, but the act, the physical transfer was made during those days. That's why as early as 2013, the Sangguniang Panlalawigan of Rizal has been clamoring that Congress declares Antipolo as the capital of Rizal. It was a de facto move to a place within the province of Rizal, considering that Pasig is no longer part of Rizal, Mr. President.
Yes.
When Rizal was still Rizal, province of Rizal, which included Parañaque and all Caloocan and all that, what was the capital of Rizal
Under the
in
old
1901?
law, under the old law, Mr. President, Section 6, the capital of the province, meaning Rizal, shall be the town of Pasig.
It's really Pasig.
Yes, it's really Pasig, sir. And the confusion was created as spread into the record by the good sponsor when PD 824 was issued, was promulgated, and Pasig was included in the metropolitan Manila area, but remained the capital of Rizal. And that is why the good sponsor has reported out this measure in order to correct this historical error and properly locate the capital in Antipolo and from Pasig, so that we now correct the erroneous inclusion of Pasig in Metro Manila. I withdraw that, Mr. President. The inclusion of Pasig in Metro Manila without amending Section 6 of Act 137.
Is Antipolo now a highly urbanized city?
I believe so, Mr. President.
All right.
Two
And-
congressional districts
And just for the record, Mr. President, and for our information, under what law did Antipolo become the capital of Rizal?
Mr. President, my records would show that as early as 2013, the provincial government transferred its seat
Yeah.
to that said place. So de facto and by
Ordinance.
yes, Mr. President, there was a Sangguniang
They amended the PD
resolution.
by ordinance.
So are we saying, Mr. President, that again, the recognition of Antipolo as the de facto capital of Rizal is simply that? It's a de facto recognition without any law authorizing it.
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, why can we not amend the proposed measure before this chamber and include there that a provision which will make the city of Antipolo the capital of Rizal, so we can solve these incongruities once and for all?
I think that's the purpose of the bill that emanated from the lower house to give congressional approval recognizing Antipolo as the capital of the province of Rizal.
So once this bill becomes law, by legislative fiat, Antipolo is now the capital of the province of Rizal.
Yes, Mr. President, because the bill, there are two bills emanating from the House which we consolidated. One was for the purpose of amending, and this is very historical, Mr. President, because we will be amending Act 137 of former President Howard Taft, Mr. President. So we will be amending a law that I assume was likewise approved by the U.S. Congress, Mr. President, because during those days, it has to be approved in Washington, D.C., Mr. President.
And okay, so Now, just one final question, Mr. President. Would the designation of a capital municipality or city of a province have any budgetary implication?
I am not aware, Mr. President, that it would require an increase in the internal revenue allotment. I would suppose, Mr. President, that being declared as the seat of government of the province, it would generate more economic activities, Mr. President. It would perhaps entice investors to go to the capital, considering that there is no more confusion, Mr. President, that it is no longer Pasig, it is now Antipolo, and perhaps, Mr. President, it would enable the province of Rizal and the city of Antipolo, and this is not the downside, to perhaps raise the real estate tax if it is required. But on the positive aspect, Mr. President, designating a city as the capital for purposes of administrative convenience and historical reasons would really augur well for the economic development of not just the city of Antipolo, but the province, the entire province of Rizal, Mr. President.
So the designation of the appropriate capital by law would enable the provincial capital to be legitimately and legally located in that designated municipality as the capital of the province.
Yes, Mr. President. Even the judiciary, the courts would be properly notified that the salas of the regional trial courts would have to be in Rizal, because it might appear that some of the functioning municipal courts or regional trial courts are still in Pasig.
Yeah,
even they have jurisdiction for Rizal. So,
And in any case, Mr. President, by necessity, the courts are now in Antipolo because otherwise they will be holding sala in the Commons, Capital Commons. So, Mr. President, with that, we no longer have any question, and we thank the sponsor.
Yeah, might as well find out from the sponsor and perhaps the minority leader. If Antipolo is a highly urbanized city, it does not vote for the governor.
I'm sorry?
Mr. President, I stand corrected. I was informed by a colleague here from the LGU, Senator Gatchalian, that it is still a component city, Mr. President.
They still vote for the
So
governor.
they vote for the governor.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, all right. Then,
I stand corrected.
indeed, it is just fitting to be the capital of Rizal in that case. Because I was a little bit worried that if it's a highly urbanized city, then it's separate from Rizal itself.
On a lighter side, Mr. President, before I sit down, and this is off the record, since we are amending a law that was approved by the U.S. Congress decades ago, are we now compelled to submit the amended act to the U.S. Congress? Just on a lighter side, Mr. President. Thank you.
I don't think so.
I don't
Anyway,
think
we
so, Mr.
already
President.
declared independence after the war. Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Also, on a similar light side, just a manifestation for the consideration of the good sponsor for whatever use the committee may make of it. As the minority leader said, I really appreciate how well prepared, including in the historical aspect, the sponsor has been. This is very, very interesting for us to know the legislative history, not just between our Congress now and a much earlier one of our republic, but as the good sponsor has just mentioned, between Congresses of two different countries. And I appreciate the discussion, not only in terms of clarifying a confusing situation, but also telling the complete story of the province of Rizal. The time that Pasig was its capital, now Pasig is part of Metro Manila, and the time now that Antipolo is going by virtue of this law, this bill, to be recognized as its capital. And again, for whatever use the good sponsor and the committee may make of it, I just want to put on record that I hope it may be somehow communicated in the proper form that those writing and telling the story of the province of Rizal can continue to tell both these parts, as not part of a confusion, but clear aspects, and for constituencies who have a sentimental value attached earlier to Pasig and then more recently to Antipolo. Pasig as the site of a lot of the important political history of the province of Rizal. And now Pasig is still the gateway through crossing to all points east into the province of Rizal. And of course, the value placed by many Filipinos, devotees of for example, of Mama Mary, as a pilgrimage site, and now to be recognized as the capital of the province of Rizal. So that's all, Mr. President. Salamat po, and salamat to the good
Thank you.
sponsor for a
Thank you.
very interesting and illuminating discussion.
Actually, Mr.
Thank you.
President, for the record as well, we in the Red Cross consider, for example, our chapter in Makati is a sub-chapter of the mother chapter of Rizal. How interesting. It's a good thing Gordon's But,
Well-
you know, in another time, Senator Gordon can illuminate us on this issue. On another
Are you
time.
calling him down?
No, no, sir.
Oh,
No,
no,
sir. With that, Mr. President, I move to close the period of interpellations on House Bill number 2998.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of interpellation is closed.
Mr. President, move to open the period of amendments. All right, there are no
Senator
amendments,
Tolentino.
Mr. President. We move to close the period of amendments.
Hearing no objection, period of amendments is closed.
And if the sponsor is willing to allow us to be co-sponsors of the measure, Mr. President. Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
Mr. President.
You
With that,
agreed?
we move to approve on second reading House Bill number 2998. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, House Bill 2998 is approved on second reading.
We move to suspend
Congratulations, Senator
consideration.
Tolentino, for coming well-equipped.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just one last sponsorship with the permission of our Minority Floor Leader. This is Senate Bill number 1382. I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order. Senate Bill number 1382. This is the electric vehicles, Mr. President, quite important.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, I move to consider Senate Bill number 1382 and ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Hearing no objection, consideration of the measure is in order. The Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 1382, an act providing the national energy policy and regulatory framework for the use of electric vehicles and the establishment of electric charging stations.
Mr. President, may we recognize the sponsors, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, to sponsor.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, peers in the Senate, good evening. On March 14, 2017, the Senate voted to ratify the Paris Agreement, an ambitious multilateral convention which seeks to substantially reduce greenhouse gas emissions worldwide by 2030. The Philippines made one of the most determined declarations among all countries under the Paris Agreement when we undertook to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 70% by 2030. During remarks delivered on the floor in favor of the ratification, this representation noted that our ability to make good on this lofty promise would be contingent upon the accessibility of new technologies to reduce emissions in an economically responsible manner. Mr. President, the bill we are sponsoring today will increase accessibility and economic viability of a key emerging technology which will help the Philippines meet its emission reduction goals, the electric vehicle, or EV for short. Before I discuss the salient features of Senate Bill number 1382, otherwise known as the Electric Vehicles and Charging Stations Act, let me provide some data on the great potential of EVs in reducing Philippine greenhouse gas emissions, fostering greater energy independence of our country, and providing economic savings for industry and households. According to the Department of Energy, the Philippines imported an estimated 97% of the total crude supply in 2019, with the first half of the year showing 74% being imported from the Middle East alone. This means we are almost completely dependent on foreign powers to fuel the day-to-day workings of our economy, including even the act of getting to and from the office daily. The transport sector, in fact, accounts for the largest share in total final energy consumption at 35%, 88% of which is for road transport. This share is expected to increase given the increasing number of motor vehicles in the country. In 2014, the Land Transportation Office estimates that there were 8 million registered motor vehicles, including motorcycles, in the country. Assuming a 10% increase every year, the Department of Energy estimates the number will go up to over 90 million by 2040. The dominance of fossil fuel-powered vehicles in the Philippine market has had severe repercussions for the environment. The transport sector is the second highest contributor to the Philippines' greenhouse gas emissions in 2016, at 31.6%. Overall, motor vehicles in the country released 34.7 million tons of CO2 equivalent into the environment in the year 2016 alone. Based on the current trajectory of Philippine greenhouse gas emissions, we will not be able to reduce emissions by 70%, let alone by 0.1% from now till 2030. Instead, we are looking at an approximate 150% increase in emissions to around 250 million tons of CO2 equivalent per annum by 2030, with the transport sector having an annual average growth rate of 5.3%. Despite all this, however, EVs represent a minuscule share of the Philippine market. Only 0.3% of the country's transport energy demand is serviced by electricity. Then again, this is not surprising, considering that according to the 2014 data of the Philippine Statistics Authority, there are only 145 light electric vehicles in the country compared to the 1.9 million diesel and 6.1 million gasoline vehicles. The tiny market share of EVs in the Philippines can be attributed to two main reasons. The first is the electric vehicles. Whether battery electric, hybrid electric vehicles, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are significantly more expensive than internal combustion engine or ICE vehicles running on gasoline or diesel. A comparative cost analysis of ICE vehicles and their EVs equivalent in the Philippine Electric Vehicle Policy Analysis Report shows that battery EVs, small car models, cost between 1.08 to more than 2 times that their ICE vehicle counterparts. Meanwhile, 1.6 million cost of an electric jeepney is roughly twice the cost of the standard diesel jeepneys, which currently service the majority of PUV cost. The second reason is the lack of national infrastructure of charging stations for electric vehicles. This makes it impractical for individuals to invest in EVs and impossible for businesses to transition to heavy EVs for industrial long-haul purposes. Mr. President, the Electric Vehicles and Charging Station Act seeks to address these barriers head-on by establishing a national policy framework to mainstream the use of EVs in the private and public sectors. The legislation outlines policies to spur demand generation for and industry development of EVs. To facilitate practical and convenient use of EVs, gasoline stations nationwide will be required to provide space for the installation of charging stations. These charging stations will be run by owners of gasoline stations themselves or by third-party service providers. Additionally, all public and private buildings constructed after the effectivity of this act shall be required to designate dedicated parking slots for the exclusive use of EVs. These parking slots will double as charging stations to further widen the nationwide network of charging stations. Furthermore, the bill mandates large industrial and commercial companies, public transportation operators, and government agencies and instrumentalities to adopt a minimum of 5% share of EVs within their respective fleets. Local government units are also tasked to create green routes for electrified public utility vehicle fleets. To parry the high cost of EVs until its eventual parity with ICE vehicles, fiscal and non-fiscal incentives are provided for the importation, utilization, and manufacture of EVs. This includes a 9-year exemption from value-added tax, custom duties, and discount on motor vehicle user charge, as well as expedited registration procedures for EV users. Moreover, the Department of Trade and Industry and the Board of Investments are mandated to establish a time-bound, targeted, performance-based, and transparent EV incentive strategy to attract EVs and EV parts manufacturing. This bill also provides a whole-of-government approach to the development of EV sector through, first, the creation of a comprehensive EV roadmap to be undertaken primarily by the DOE, together with the DOTR, DTI, BOI, and DOST. And second, the assignment of specific and responsibilities for these agencies, including ERC, DNR, PWH, and the LGUs to guarantee the law's effective implementation. This synergistic government policy framework will ensure that all aspects of the EV policy will be formulated and implemented by most capable agency for that purpose. If implemented correctly, Mr. President, we estimate that the electrification of the Philippine fleet of vehicles could end up reducing oil consumption in the country by as much as 146.56 million barrels a year. This would create savings of $9.8 billion of or 490 billion pesos per year. Essentially, this bill is good for the environment and good for our wallets too. Considering the seismic environmental and economic implications of this bill, Mr. President, I join the honorable co-authors of this legislation, namely Senate President Pro Tempore Ralph Recto, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Senator Mig Zubiri, Senator Manny Pacquiao, Senator Grace Poe, and Senator Coco Pimentel in sponsoring this measure and urging the Chamber to approve the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I too have a co-sponsorship speech, but I will just submit this to the Secretariat and insert to the records, Mr. President, to hasten the proceedings.
All right, so recorded.
With that, Mr. President, we move to suspend consideration